Hello, hello. Hey, yo. We have mentoring session number 2 ahead of us today. Pretty much the same setup as last time. I suspect people will come in, ask a bunch of questions, we'll talk for 2-3 hours. I put the last video on YouTube, so now it's been exactly 2 weeks. And if we go to YouTube, we can see the video got about 250 views. I think that's probably not great given that a lot of the people who see that are probably followers of the channel already. There's all these stupid thumbnails for my other videos. But I think there is still some value provided. So I think the goal here, if I'm to continue to do these, is going to be pull more people in who are brand new and who aren't shy about asking the questions that they might have. So posting on Twitter is one of the ways we can do that. Let me make sure this actually worked. Yes. Okay, good. Yeah, so the other thing that I had done, and I posted on Discord about this, I made a blog post about imposter syndrome. This stemmed from 2 things. One is 2 weeks ago, we talked about this, and I think it affects a lot of people. And then last week, that's what I was trying to say originally, I really strongly felt this at my own job. And I felt like I had all of the signs. I was told, hey, you might feel this way at some point. I know that this exists. I've fought with this before, and yet it hit me again. And so I wrote this post and I talked about 2 major things. One, thought experiments, just ways to hopefully put a dent in what negative thinking you might have. So there's a bunch of these. And then the actual techniques. And what I've been doing, I've been sort of journaling all of my work accomplishments anyway, but sometimes that would steer a little bit toward negativity where I would write something like, I really struggled today to accomplish even just a small task. That's a really negative way of phrasing it. I could just say, like, I achieved a small task and I learned a lot in the process. So there are some other things here too, mentoring, and I wrote that this works both ways. So, like, find a mentee. This is one of the ways that it actually helps me too. And of course, if I can provide any value for you guys. Hey, Nui. Hey, Schrodinger's. Yeah, and I think that's what's difficult about imposter syndrome. Saying I feel it at times, and even myself that I feel it at times. I feel like it can rear its ugly head at almost any point, and it really is a specific flavor of negative thinking. So I think there are ways to combat it. Funnily enough, I never closed this tab from last time, so we had 667 lines. I think I'm finally going to just do that now. I don't think there's any reason to keep it around, and we'll start at number 1. Hey, Timon. So how's everybody doing? How's everyone learning, doing in their careers? I hope you're all having a good time. Hey, Maple and Kennedy. I think one of the things I learned last time doing this stream is that it's a little bit slow to start and that there needs to be some way to sort of kick off the conversation. And then once the ball got rolling, it was almost impossible to stop it. And there was just nonstop talking for a while. Hey, Carly Dot. So as for me, I think when I look at the last 2 weeks, it had been, yeah, some amount of imposter syndrome, then that blog post. And then actually, I'd say the last few days, when I was mindful about what was going on with imposter syndrome, have actually been pretty good. So I've been phrasing things positively. I've been just trying to make sure that every day I know a little bit more than I knew the day before. Hey, Smash. Yeah, I actually haven't played Among Us, although I do know it's thoroughly in this topic. Yeah, and I like seeing that improvement. And so one of the things that I've been thinking about is I think I tend to operate at sort of like maximum capacity almost all the time. And the capacity here is stress, not necessarily time. So I will put in a certain number of hours per day working, and then there are all these other things I like to do. And some of them take energy as well. So then I get to the end of the week and I'm like, wow, I don't know if I can do this again. And any little thing might push me over to too stressed territory. Hey, Zachariah. Hey, Deviant. Can you tell what you should know to master Java? So let's scope this down a little bit. The way I think of mastering any programming language is that it's a lot of practice and a lot of knowing what is the right idiom or paradigm to use in Java. And so then it turns into what design patterns should you apply, when should you apply them, what data structures and algorithms should you use. So where are you in your journey, Zachariah? How many years do you have of Java? And I phrase this as years, but if you've been doing it for 2 weeks, that's totally fine for an answer. And also, what are your goals? So mastering Java could be a goal, but probably more likely your goal is going to be make a certain kind of program, get a certain kind of job. I think it's good to know those things. That is a new chair, Blues. Actually, I don't think I have a command to talk about this. Hey, Blue Horse. Hey, Joe. Do you think underemployment is a problem in IT? And if so, do you think it's going to get worse or better? So in IT specifically, I can't really comment too much. I guess what this is talking about with underemployment is that there are more people out there who want jobs, but they're not getting them for some reason. Is that what we're talking about, Maple? And by the way, this is kind of how this will work. Is I'll ask some questions. We'll eventually get the answer. We'll loop back to this stuff. Hey, Mark, I have general anxiety disorder, which manifests itself as constant imposter syndrome. Even simple things like cooking, I get imposter syndrome. Stoicism has helped me overcome that anxiety, become much more productive. I think one of my main points that I'm trying to teach here is this line. Everyone's different, so you need to find out what's worked for you and then remember it. And I don't think people are very formal about this process sometimes. So, Mark, it sounds like for you, you found something that works for you. I think that's awesome. I think if this can apply to the general population, that would be a great thing to share. And yet, I think you might have it's sort of like the what are they called, Skinner boxes, I think, where you have to do a certain set of actions, usually for like a mouse or a parrot or something like that, and then they get a treat. And so they learn to do this very specific set of actions. I think this is how some of us can overcome imposter syndrome as well, is there's probably some set of actions or circumstances and you need to find them. And then we find them sometime and we just forget about them. And we think like, cool, that worked. I hopefully won't have this problem ever again in my life. And that's not realistic. And this is why I think just kind of taking notes for everything is one of the best things you can do because you won't forget these things. Hey, Wes. Good to see you too. Have you started your new job? Hey, Leftist. Nice shirt, cool event. Have a good stream. Well, thank you for dropping in, Leftist. I hope you're having a great Saturday. Hey, Stevie. And thank you. Yeah, I did get a job at Google. It's been now 3 months and 4 days. So it's it hasn't really been too long in sort of Google time. I think at a lot of jobs you can feel like 3 months was long enough to ramp up. I feel like I'm still doing that, and that maybe somewhere between 4 months to maybe like 10 months, I'll feel like I'm more comfortable. 4 months is a stretch. I don't think within the next month I'm going to feel comfortable, but I'm working toward that. And that's where that, like I said, this blog post are coming. Now, I'm talking about this blog post a lot. One of the things I used to do with my blog post is if you go back to one of the very first ones, I think in the middle of the page, yeah, there's like an email sign up at the bottom. There's check out my course. I just stopped doing that. There's no advertisements in here. It's purely just let's talk about imposter syndrome. So if you guys want that blog post, it is right there. But yeah, this is what I'm trying to focus on myself, is just slowly kind of getting better at things. Any tips for jumping into a project or code base new to me? Yeah, we talked about this before. I want to identify these topics. So this I'm going to write down because this is something that might pop up a decent amount. What I suggest for these sorts of things is come up with sort of small tasks. So you could always just navigate the code base. That will help a bit, but it's probably not going to be great. And so tackling small bugs, small features, these are really good. Debugging through the code to figure out the flow. And of course, talking to coworkers and reading documentation about how it works. All of these are ways that will help. So if you think about it, it's look at the code in isolation, look at the code with somebody else, look at the code under your own microscope and figure out a little bit more about it. I think the best way is usually one of these two ways because it involves this debugging. Both of these kind of do. Let's just duplicate that and put it here. And then you supplement it with these other things. So talk to your coworkers when you get stuck, read documentation. That's generally worked for me. I think that's a pretty good strategy for this stuff. And then in general, navigating the code base. I think this is decent. It's not great, or it's not enough on its own, I should say. The underuse of workers and overqualification in which an employee has education, experience, or skills beyond the requirements of the job. Oh, I see. Okay, so I guess is the problem more about like companies hire at the wrong level or salary, or that I guess like workers aren't getting promoted? Because I understand what you're saying in the definition of underemployment now. And so to talk about this in the original context of the question of, do you think this is a problem in IT? Again, I don't really have the visibility into that. I think this is an issue, and I felt this way once, although again, I don't know exactly what the problem is related to here, where I felt like I was hired in at a lower level than I should have been. And I very quickly got demotivated because I thought I'm not doing the work I should be doing. And I asked for a promotion, and it wasn't until I finally had said, okay, I'm quitting, that they said, okay, we could give you that promotion. And I said, it's too late now. I already made plans. So yeah, I see it as a problem. I don't know if it's an industry problem. Hard for me to talk about that. Java 2 years. Okay, and then did you share what are your goals, Zachariah? So 2 years. And yeah, what are your goals with it? And like I said, mastering Java, it can be a goal, and you could totally say that, but it's probably you're making a program, you're trying for certain career goals, you're trying to get a job. And so knowing what I know now, 2 years of Java, what I would probably also ask are like, what are the barriers, do you think? So what do you think is stopping you? Chances are you've written lots of Java programs over 2 years, and you know how the language works. You might have read some articles, you might have seen other people's code in Java. And so mastering Java might seem like an unattainable goal because you feel like you know everything. But how do you know that you know everything? And so the way I look at it is more like, can you do a task that would reasonably be expected to be done by a Java programmer? So if I said something like, make a make a GUI, make a web server, those sorts of things. Like, would you know how to do that? Would you know how to pursue that? And if you do, then maybe you're closer than you think to mastering it. Hey, Nut. How important do you think it is for a software engineer on the application layer to know C and how a computer works? This is a really tough question. I think it's a very interesting question. So, in general, you won't be hurt by knowing C or how a computer works. That's one thing I can say for sure. I don't think that extra knowledge is somehow going to help you here. There's somewhat of an opportunity cost that you could look at for having pursued that knowledge instead of something else. But in general, knowing this stuff will help you in some way. But now, how much? How important is it? So the way I see it is, it all depends on what level of the stack you're working with. And you mentioned you're on the application layer. And then how much that interacts with parts of the stack lower. Excuse me. So, example I like to use is game engines. At some point in time, in the 90s and the early 2000s, there weren't really commercial game engines you could use without spending a bunch of money. And I can't speak authoritatively on how many of those existed. But nowadays you have things like Unity, you have things like Unreal. Back then though, you had to work on things like rendering yourself. You had to work on 3D math by yourself. You had to work on like audio and input and maybe physics and all this other stuff. All of these are domains unto themselves and would be very difficult for any one person to master them all when they were trying to make a game in the first place. Now they've got to go through a game engine. And people have done it. It's possible. And so I come back to knowing C or how a computer works. In a sense, this is sort of like what game engines have done for games. You can get by without knowing exactly how memory allocation works, how the garbage collector works, how your OS is going to schedule threads onto the processor, how maybe multi-threading even works, although that I would say is probably in the realm of application developers still. You can get by without that, but knowing it will probably give you a more complete view of the system and also generally more confidence on how this works. So that was a long answer. The short answer is it depends. And that if I had to say you're always going to be sticking in the application layer forever, it's probably like a 5 out of 10 importance. I think it's good to know. I think you can always just get an overview and kind of go from there. Yeah, and by the way, this I'm gonna write down. I wanna look into this a little bit more too. I know only the very high level tenets of Stoicism. For example, those very hard interviews, but don't use the knowledge required in everyday tasks. This is a slightly different problem, I would say, than underemployment. Although maybe I'm misunderstanding here. And by the way, this is, again, for anyone new, this is how the stream is going to work. I'm like 7 minutes behind on chat already. For me, it is currently 9:12, and I'm reading stuff from 7 minutes ago. So it'll seem like there's a lot of delay between getting your answers. I think the problem here is that the interview doesn't really align with the job a lot of the time. And I don't think that's necessarily underemployment. I think this is that it's difficult to gauge exactly how software engineers will do on a job. And people try to get very close. And then people start copying what other people have done. And then you end up with this sort of Katamari ball of trash that just keeps rolling around collecting more trash. So I think they're related. And I'm not trying to dodge the questions or anything. I think this is, in my mind, more of a discussion. But if you do have any pointed questions you want to ask, feel free, and I try to answer those. Um, so yeah, so it's still hard for me to speak to underemployment on a sort of larger scale. Any tips for recruiting a really solid developer to your project in a part-time capacity? I wonder what this is about. I think the answer to this is solely networking, and it sounds like you've got some pretty good networking, Schrodinger's. And then it's also, I guess, some like advertising and sort of traditional routes. But for you to have what it sounds like is important for you, which is trust, proficiency, and well, I guess the sort of opportunity. I think these things are probably the most important. I think that's all about networking. It's all about like, hey, do you know anyone? Do you know anyone who knows anyone? Can you use someone else's network and that's sort of part of your network? And so, Schrodinger's, if you want to use the stream right now and share a little blurb about what you're looking for, I'm happy to, yeah, you could send a message like that. How am I doing? Hey, Draco, that's an easy question. I'm doing well right now. I'm glad to be here. Second week, nice. So you're drinking from the fire hose. I hope it's good. I hope it's everything you wanted, Wes. You've been on a long journey. You've done really well. And nice to see you too, Sammy. Has it been tough so far working at Google? I think the short answer here is yes. And I think part of the reason why it's tough is onboarding. I read a post on Reddit yesterday that was something along the lines of if you have a generally good work environment, as in employees aren't very cutthroat, you're being respected, then that's something to be very grateful for. And I think that Google is certainly that. They strive to make their culture good, they strive to give you work life balance. And so all of the basics are there. What's not there yet for me is feeling like I'm very effective at the job, like I've made an impact. Granted, like I said, it's been 3 months and 4 days. So I don't really expect that out of this amount of time. But yet, whenever you're making big career moves, typically, I don't know what the average tenure is at every company. I'd have to guess it's somewhere probably between like 2 hours, 2 years to 3 years at maybe the sort of bigger companies. And maybe at smaller companies, it's, I don't know, like 4 to 5 years. I'm just making up numbers here. My point is that most of the time, when you're switching from a job to another job, you were on the tail end of many years. Probably after 3 years, 5 years at a company, you were feeling like you were effective. You knew the lay of the land. Maybe you got a little bit bored with how much you felt like you were doing because you weren't learning as much anymore. And so you had a certain speed expectation in mind. Then you go to a new company and all of that is just pulled out from under you. And they're like, okay, go learn a whole bunch of new systems, which you have to do. So yeah, in that sense, it's been tough. I think that if you were to ask me again in a year, I would say that the short answer is still yes, but probably for different reasons. And hopefully by then it's due to having grown in the position and maybe tackling more responsibility and scope. Do you have a process for reviewing your notes? I find that I take a healthy amount of notes, but just don't refer back to them. Been looking at potentially using Anki for active recall. I don't tend to review my notes and make sure that they're great unless there's a need for that. So for example, I took a bunch of Godot notes on the game engine. I might never go back to those. And if I don't think there was really a need for me to review them or keep them actively in my mind. But if I do go back to them and I find a mistake with them, I will try to fix that. So the way I look at this is keep your brain for the necessary, keep your notes for everything else. And I'll make this sound a little bit better, I guess. So the way I see it is if you know how to find that information, that's pretty much just as good as having that information. So if I were ever to go back to Python again and I want to learn how to sort an array, I wouldn't just like try to type that out of my fingers. I'd just go to a site like this and I'd say, oh, yeah, okay, cool, here's how this works, and I'd be done. That's how I look at my notes as well. It's like a mini Google, mini search engine that you've got for yourself of notes that you typed and will hopefully make sense to you in the future. And Godot, continue to learn and make something. I haven't been using Godot, if that's what you're asking. My personal projects have been kind of few and far between. I think work has been taking up a lot of mental space, and so after work, it's been typically like non-programming tasks. Given 3 months on board, very grateful that I already have the skills they want me to have as far as AWS, React, TensorFlow. Oh yeah, no, that's great. That's a big step up. And I think what you'll find is probably if I'm interpreting this correctly, you want to be put in sooner. You'll probably have that opportunity. I think what Amazon tends to do is slowly ramp up your sprint tasks so that at first you're at like 10% capacity and then you go to 40% and then 70% and then finally you're like a full-time employee. And you could probably just make those jumps a little sooner if you feel like you're going to be effective at it. But I struggle most understanding the concepts quickly. I had to take a course about JUnit and Mockito, which is a 3-hour course. It took me like 2 days to get the grasp. Any idea on how one can do it quicker? Here is what is very tough, and this is what I kind of talked about in this imposter syndrome blog post, is you don't know how other people learn this stuff. And even if you did, this is sort of like a thought experiment for you, which is the video, obviously you can say is 3 hours. Okay, great. It can take 3 hours to watch. But how long does it take to actually consume the content of it? And a 3-hour video for someone who doesn't know something will not take 3 hours to consume. It's going to always take longer because you're going to need to write notes. You're going to need to pause and go back. It'll always take 3 hours to watch. That's for sure. So I would say you might not actually need to make this any quicker. Now, we could start to talk about the time scale of this. Like, should a 3-hour video take 10 days to consume? Like, maybe not. But this is where I say, is it really a problem? Like, if this is your learning process, maybe this is fine. So how can you do it quicker? I'll still try to answer the spirit of the question here. The way I see this is there's notes and there's kind of digging into gaps. I take notes for a lot of what I watch. And as you take notes, you will learn where you should be taking notes a little bit better. And that's a whole other topic that I think I'd like to write a blog post on at some point. As far as the digging into gaps, you might find that there are parts where you think, I don't really understand this, but I also don't know how important it's going to be. And that's where I think the first digging in is this meta knowledge of, yeah, how important is this? And if you can answer that question and the answer is very or significantly, then yeah, then you need to dig in a little bit more and spend more time on that. So I think 3 hours, yeah, definitely a long time, especially when it expands into something that's like 9 hours of note taking or applying. And maybe that's where you take a more piecemeal approach and just say, you know what, I'm going to split this into like a 1 hour chunk and then go try to do a task. And if I'm still having difficulty, I'll do another 1 hour chunk. Hey, alligator. And hey, time dictator. How do you make yourself valuable as an engineer when you're not employed? How do you make yourself more employable? I try to steer people toward job postings, as in go look at jobs you want and then find what you don't know. And so I did this last time I was looking, and I wrote down a bunch of notes on things that I didn't know that I saw were coming up in the kinds of jobs that I'd want. So for example, I saw that Rust was coming up a decent amount. It wasn't actually a ton. React Native, all these things are listed here. And I wrote this list for myself. And then because I was streaming, I thought, you know what, I'm going to tackle some of these things on stream. So we spent some time learning Golang. We spent some time learning Rust. I don't think we got much farther than that because then I started interviewing. And I thought that was really helpful because that way you know you're working toward a solid concrete goal and it's specifically job postings that you like. So you know that it's not just some list that somebody else came up with. And then, yeah, to try to sprinkle in, I know this might sound silly, so try to sprinkle in some fun activities. You know, come up with a project that you want to do and maybe work on your portfolio. This may or may not be fun. Put it at a lower level. You got a promotion when you consider quitting. I'd love to learn more about that experience. I can't say got a promotion because I did end up quitting. The timeline was roughly something like this. It was, and let's just say it was January. It wasn't January though, but let's say it was get hired in January. It was around the time of, let's say, like October that I felt like I stopped learning. And then I started looking around. And then in probably like December, I had said like, okay, I'm quitting to do something else. And that's when they said, oh, well, now that we realize we're going to lose you, we're going to try to make things better. So we can give you a team, we can make you a lead, we can have you work on whatever area you want to work on. And presumably that would have come with a raise. I didn't actually ask. I said, I'm already quitting at that point. And by the way, this was 2015. This is what led to me sort of being on Twitch and working on Botland. So in my mind, I made the right move. But what this all boiled down to was an ultimatum. And it's a very high risk, high reward strategy. I don't recommend it, and I think that's a last ditch effort. So when you've already talked to the right people and you've tried to go through the quote unquote proper processes, if all of that's been exhausted, then you stick to the okay, well, I'm quitting now, and they might say, okay, see ya, there's the door. Am I the only one who sucks at coding? I don't think you should consider yourself to suck at coding. The way I look at this is either you're new, in which case you shouldn't be too hard on yourself. You're kind of like intermediate, in which case you should just look at how much you've learned. Or you're a professional expert. I mean, it depends on how you kind of define this stuff. In which case, you can break the problem down and try to figure out where you're working on this stuff. Oh, apparently you said something after this. I'm learning JavaScript for like a year now, and I'm still at the level where I began. Yeah, so you're still in kind of the newish bucket, and this is where I would say, how has your learning gone? Has it been sort of focused learning? Has it been trying to build on where you felt these gaps were? Have you been following tutorials, or is this more of something that's sort of passive and you're like, yeah, I study JavaScript, once per week, and then I'll go a couple weeks without doing it? It's like, that's probably not a cadence at which you can learn effectively. And so this is a problem that you could work on. And I think there are lots of resources out there to help with this stuff. And so you'll probably have some more specific questions about, okay, how do I go about learning this? How do I feel like I'm not sort of lost in the weeds here? By the way, I'm like 14 minutes behind on chat. This is going to keep increasing until it gets to like 20 or 25, and then I'll try to speed up a little bit. Goal is to make high scalable level web app full stack. Okay, so that's what you consider sort of mastery in Java. Here is what I would say. This goal of making scalable web apps has a tiny bit to do with Java. And let's say that tiny bit is like 40%. The other 60% is going to be knowledge, technologies, frameworks, libraries. So, give you a quick example. Let's say you want to make your application highly scalable, and so you say, you know what, I'm going to use a load balancer. There's going to be almost no Java that plays into that. But yet you will need a load balancer at some point. And let's say that somehow there was like a Java load balancer that you could use. Then this now fits into the libraries, frameworks, knowledge, technology category. You know how to call a function. You might need to run a Lambda on AWS. That's just going to be a function call for you. Actually, it's going to be a little different than that. But in general, it's not going to be that you need more Java for that. So short answer here is like, I'd say focus a little bit on system design. Try to learn try to like look at the bigger picture of how all these technologies fit together and how you would do this. And then see if Java is really the shortcoming, because it could be, but I doubt that it is. Trouble finding the right place to start learning, whether that's a certain website, textbook. Do you have an example of a proper roadmap, a learning language or specialization? Yeah, this is another topic that comes up quite a lot. Is I think people generally want to know what's like a known good path to success. You see this quite a lot in every field and every like tutorial set of videos, and even I think this shows up even in minor areas. Like people will ask me, hey, what mouse and keyboard do you use? Like, I think the way they would look at this is, oh, hey, his setup works for him. Maybe I should just copy his setup. So what's really tough about this is there are probably some known good paths out there that I wouldn't be able to share, because what I went through was so many years ago at this point that it'd be different now. And so whatever website or textbook I use has probably been built upon. But there's like a known good general path. And then also there are probably resources out there to find the more specific paths. And the general path is this. I should maybe blog about this too. I'm trying to find more topics I can kind of write about and point to at some point. The general path is take it one step at a time, like focus on scope, focus on learning, focus on having fun as you go. And then in general, a lot more pieces will become clear as you go, and they'll sort of lock into place. So you start out and you say, hey, I want to make the next World of Warcraft, and you don't even know how to program. And the first step is like, okay, well, let's learn how to program. That's a pretty reasonable first step. As you start to do that, you learn about things like back end and front end and full stack. And you think, oh man, I need to learn more about servers. I need to learn more about game engines. And as those pieces fit into place, you just keep the scope part in mind, and you keep just tackling a chunk of that problem. At some point, you get to where you feel like, okay, I'm good enough for whatever that goal was originally. And that's where you start to steer more toward the goal. So if it's a job, you do that thing I just mentioned earlier where you look at job postings, you figure out what the gaps are. If it was a specific project, you start maybe like designing and prototyping the project. And that way you're always guiding yourself every step of the way toward the goal that you have. Do most of you guys do web dev? I do. I feel like I want to branch out, not sure about where. Always struggle with deciding what I want to do in the CS field. I've done web dev and I like it. I think a lot more has become web dev in the last 20 years probably, because every service now needs to interact with the internet in some way. Even if you think about a program, let's take like MS Paint. Let's say this was a product you could buy and it was $10 or something. You can't just magically get this program. You have to get it from somewhere. There's probably going to be like a marketing website even. That part of where you download it from, how you market this, at the very least, that part's going to be web dev. And it's almost impossible for any business nowadays to not have some web presence, even if it's not a dedicated site. My wife and I passed by a food truck yesterday, and the first thing we did, we didn't walk over to the food truck and like look at the menu. We looked it up on our phones. And even this food truck, it turns out it was on Facebook, so they didn't make their own website. So I feel like web dev is very prevalent. I think branching out is a good idea just to get a taste of it. And the start that you could do, you could do any number of things actually. You could look at making your own personal site or a blog or learning about like web dev technologies. You can go to the like HTTP server level if you want. You can learn about sort of broader scope here. So there's lots to pursue. I think it's worth at least looking into a little bit. Hey Mac. I think it's less C and knowing memory management and how computer works. If C gets you there, then great. Yeah, I think so too. I think C makes this a little bit more in your face about it, with you having to allocate and manage memory yourself and not having a garbage collector behind that, with you having to know how arrays are laid out contiguously, maybe having to think a little bit more about, well, this is a stretch, but the assembly level, if you ever dive into that. That's not technically C at that point, but it's more intertwined. Can we roadmap? What are we talking about? Are we saying can we just add this as a command? I'd have to look into this to find out about it. Hey Frag, I'm doing well. I'm now streaming every other Saturday. And I'm going to try to keep this schedule, and I'm going to try to see where group mentoring takes us. I think what I've seen so far is I think people are getting some value out of this, and I really like that. And I also like that it doesn't have any real like setup time for me. I did do some homework for this. I wrote a blog post on what I thought was the biggest thing last time. And again, for anyone who wants this, just type the imposter command. But that homework is very minimal, and I could do that at my leisure. And if I hadn't done it, I would still just talk about the same things. But what I want to do is I kind of want to boil all of the main common topics into other blog posts and feel like we've got a pretty good set of things to get people started in software engineering. Hey, hi, Kirsty. And hey, Michael. Are there any other Google developers here in chat? I see. Yeah, it's a very specific demographic you're looking at. Anyway, I will call some attention to this for anyone who is working at Google and is looking for a 20% project. Do message Schrodinger's King. They have a very interesting project. Am I exclusively using Go at work right now? Let's just say the short answer for this is yes. Yeah, let's just say yes. Been a while since I've been here. Last was you got accepted on the cloud team. Any update? We stoked to know how it's going. Hey, Gooba. It's going well. I think I've got the Google command that talks about it a little bit. I don't think this is a very interesting command because there's not a whole lot I can talk about. In general, their policy is if it's public, you can talk about it, and you got to be careful about where you inject your own viewpoint into something. So asking about my opinion on Google Technology X, for example, is probably going to be met with like, I can't really share too much about that. You know, even if it's public, if you ask like, how do you feel about Google Docs, I could probably share some basic stuff about that. You know, like this is obviously it's been out. I've been using it on stream for like 5 years now. So yeah, there's a little bit more information there with the Google command, but in general, it's going well. Hey, Metalstorm. What's your process for debugging? It all depends on what I'm trying to do. So let's say I'm trying to fix a bug, and let's say I don't know the code base. What I'll probably do is just get my bearings at first and figure out, okay, what is the bug? How do I repro it? What code path is it going through? And then from there, what I'll try to do is list my hunches and then investigate each hunch. So this is my sort of general process, especially if I don't know the code base. And then the debugging will take me through like stop at functions I don't know, try to figure out the code path. You can look through all of the code and sometimes not really have a clear picture of how do these pieces fit together. And that's where going through it yourself, debugging, is really helpful. Yeah, everything is different. And yet I'm the same person. You guys are the same. The sprint is 2 weeks. I don't know if I can talk about that, so I will hold off. Hey, Define Evil. Want to catch a start? Couldn't easily find the start time. Yeah, I've got the schedule online. I try to start at 9 a.m. Pacific time, and so right now it is 9:32. Unfortunately, daylight saving time happens at different times or different days in different countries, and so every once in a while it's like, oh hey, I know Adam's stream schedule, and then for 2 weeks it's just not that schedule anymore. So that's a little bit tough. Hey, Reformulate. I did not leave Google. I don't know what I had said around the time that made that seem like the case. Try to ask on Discord. Seems like the wrong source of truth. Where's a good place to find this? You're talking about just the start time of the stream? Because yeah, like I said, there's the info panels under the stream. They should have the schedule, and then I'm pretty sure I have a schedule command as well. And good, I'm glad, Time Dictator. Yeah. Hey, Rainy. See you behind the chat. I'll just bundle this now. Wednesday's the interview with the technical director in HR for the C# position. I'm expecting technical questions. Don't really have a question, but if you've got any advice. Aren't you streaming right now, Rainy? What are you doing in here? I have a note to host you at the end of my stream. I thought you were going to be online for like 10 hours. Anyway, I'll still answer. Hopefully you're here. General advice on technical questions. So I think the way I'd approach this is breadth. You have a pretty short timeline, which is Wednesday. And also you told me privately that the interviews are going pretty well so far. So I don't think you have too much to worry about. But in the, 4 days you have left, I would say go look at various technical questions you think you might be asked. And if you are not sure, it's actually a little too late probably to ask what you'll be asked at this point, because you have 2 business days. So if you asked on Monday and got an answer on Tuesday, it wouldn't really help. So that's why in general, I'd say look at the sort of like leak code kinds of problems and look at system design kinds of problems. Most technical questions are going to fit into one of these categories. And the reason I say go for breadth is just because of your timeline. So look at different data structures, look at different algorithms, and then with system design, get kind of a broad picture of this. So I have that system design note, and it's got a lot of resources at the top here. I think, do I have a section here? Sorry, going through this is going to be, yeah, like something like the very bottom of this, there's this Harvard lecture video. This isn't too bad. I'm not really recommending this for anyone in chat other than maybe Rami, just to get like an idea of this video covers a lot of concepts and see if any of them are particularly foreign to you, and then maybe drill into those a little bit. Hey, Nafis. Good to be back. They have to fear losing to work with you, losing your work with you. Managers to wait until you're ready to leave with bad managers. I think there were kind of a set of problems. I do think this in itself is just a general issue. Like, if it takes an ultimatum to get the outcome that you want, chances are you still don't want to stay there. Because what does that mean? Does that mean another ultimatum is going to come around and things are going to change drastically again? Like, why did we get to that situation? So for me, I had the momentum to leave and I left. Oh, that's why. That's what I was talking about. No, I was talking about a different company. A past non-Google company. Sorry, I'm responding to Metal Storm at this point. But yeah, I think it's a shame. Manager told a friend, SWE, at one of the sort of big N FANG companies, you're operating the next level, but I don't think you should seek promotion since it may be too much pressure. Do we have alignment? Funky wording is verbatim. Is this understandable or whack? Okay, so there's 2 kinds of talking. There's talking, and then there's manager talk. And then do we have alignment? Is manager talk for, like, my viewpoint is kind of set in stone at this point. That's sort of how I see this. I'm like, you should see my viewpoint here. Anyway, this is beside the point. It may be too much pressure is actually a very real concern. So at these big companies, you typically have levels that span somewhere from like, let's say like 4 to 7 achievable levels. So you start as a college grad, let's say, and you might be, well, I'll just say like level 1. And then, like every kind of 2 years, you might get +1 level. And so that at some point, it becomes a little bit harder. It maybe takes like 3 to 5 years. And then you get to the point where you're, whatever, a fellow or a distinguished engineer at those companies. This means that at some point, the level jump from, let's say, X to level X+1 will actually, it could potentially be a little bit too much. So every company will have a level that you are fine just staying at. And so, like, let's say at some, just mystical company here, it's like level 3. You could just be a level 3 the rest of your life at this company, and they'd be fine with that, and you'd still feel like you have a good lay of the land in your career, good opportunities, to the point where if you were to go to level 4, it might be difficult. So this part about it being too much pressure, I don't think it's just made up. And I think my advice to your friend is pretty simple here. It's talk to people at the next level and see how they felt getting to that level. And this is actually what I'm going to do at Google. So I am currently my goal in the next like couple of years is get to the next level. And my first question is, do I even want that? So I think I want that, but I need to go talk to people who are at that level and who grew from the last level, not that they got hired in, and ask them, how did your job change? How do you feel you dealt with the responsibility, and all sorts of other things that go along with that. And I have a little bit more I could say about this, about like working at the next level before you actually get to that level, but I'll move on for now because we're 13 minutes behind. Yeah, I think this is pretty good. Passive learner, maybe that's it. I'd love to know more about the science of this, but my understanding of the science of this, the science behind learning, is that people all learn the same way, but they're motivated by different things. So some people might think that a picture is easier to learn from, but the actual process of taking in that knowledge is generally the same. I'd be careful about labeling yourself as, let's say, like a passive learner. That might just be what you're comfortable doing. That might not actually be an effective way of learning. And this might sound a little harsh, one of the kinds of proofs of that might be that you've been learning JavaScript in probably the way that you feel comfortable doing for the last year, and yet you feel like you've made no progress. That could be an indication that your learning methodology is actually a little flawed. So I would say analyze that a bit and try to figure out what has been effective when you've learned. Like, what parts have you picked up? How did you learn those? How can you replicate that? For a long time, I had a laziness problem with working on personal projects. Do you have any tips on how to fight this laziness? I think the first is to identify if it's actually laziness. We all have kind of a limited amount of energy and effort that we can expend in a given day or week. And if you're working, let's say, a full-time job, you've got some extra responsibilities, and then you come home from work and those responsibilities, and you're like, I just don't have it in me to do more. That's not laziness. And I think that's very important to start with. Now, let's say you're on the opposite end of that spectrum. You're working 0 hours per week. You're being like fed grapes off of a plate, and you have no responsibilities. Then yeah, maybe it's laziness. And so to answer that question of like, how would you fight this? I think it's building good habits, and it's starting small. So if you were to be like, every day I'll code for 5 hours, this is a recipe for disaster. This just won't happen for most people. And so if you were to say something instead, every day I'll start and go for 10 minutes and I'll continue if I'm liking it, that's a much more achievable thing. Like, it's not too bad to start, and 10 minutes isn't too much. And if you hate that entire 10 minutes, then fine, you lost 10 minutes of your day. So I think it's just building that habit and realizing that it can be more approachable than you think. But anytime you're looking at a mountain to climb, it's going to be much more daunting than just taking one step up a staircase. So try to turn it into steps up a staircase instead of climbing a mountain. Hey, Artie. And what kind of chair is this? This is a Secret Lab Omega. This I will actually delete from my notes. They have not paid me. I shall not advertise for them more than answering the question. Hope that food truck had a QR code on the side. This was the weirdest thing. We've never seen this food truck before. We went out for food last night at about, I don't know, 6:30. And that means, so like sunset in the Seattle-ish area is like a depressing 5 p.m. or something right now. So it was dark out, and we saw a bunch of people outside of a food truck at like 6:30. And we thought, okay, that has to mean it has good food. Because how do people even know this thing exists in the dark? And yeah, so we looked at the menu. Looked good enough. We ended up just going to the place we already headed to. Hey, Global Hero. And yeah, all's been well. Good to see you too. Yeah, I'm glad to be back. Feels like I can read the chat or listen to you. So if I want to give input to another person's question while you're answering, it's almost too far away. Higher priority on low latency. So thank you for the feedback. The way that I see this is there's a balance between kind of thoroughness and then also having a question queue that we can talk about. So by doing things this way, there's content for like the next couple hours. And I don't say this as like a YouTuber who's like, I need videos to react to or something. But I want to make sure that people are getting the help that they need. And I think if I were to give a very high level answer to everything, that people wouldn't feel as satisfied. So actually, chat, I'm interested to hear what you think about this. And when you answer, do mention something about the context of this, since by the time I get to it, it'll be like 15 minutes from now. But RE, the XOR topic, share your thoughts. Because yeah, I'm curious. Hey, you safe? And hey, it's fine. how's your understanding and feelings compared to the past 2 weeks? It's a lot better. I think that writing out this blog post on imposter syndrome, I kind of wrote at the bottom, this was as much for me as it is for the people reading it. I need to internalize this and I need to focus on it. And I think the main thing that's worked for me, there are a couple things. One is the talk to your coworkers part. This is really important, especially when you trust your coworkers. And two is the sort of like one day at a time mentality. So just, do I know more this week than I did last week? That's kind of how I'm looking at this. I guess you sort of change this to 1 week at a time. Hello, Waffle. It's treating me well. I think things are going pretty smoothly now. There were a lot of hiccups and turbulence last week. Every programmer should know imperative languages, functional languages, hardware design. Notice other experienced programmers say similar things. Thoughts on this? I think this has to do with the level of depth you want to go into something. When I think about what one should know in any field, the ideal is just 100% of that field, right? But the sort of practical for any given programmer is, if you were to just draw out a bell curve, most programmers are probably not going to have dealt with all of this stuff. Most programmers probably take like a slightly more hacky route, probably a more traditional, like let's just learn imperative languages and then not think about it so much. And then with their extra time, they're doing things that aren't programming. So my guess is George Haas specifically is one of the programmers that goes the extra mile, is probably higher up on the bell curve, and then says that, well, here's my path to success. Maybe this applies to a lot more people. And like it's not bad. It's not bad advice. Like, yeah, learning different paradigms is good. It will expand your brain. And if you feel like you need that level of depth, that's great. And if you're like happy at your job, you're happy with your programming knowledge, that's also great. How long did it take to get up to speed and go? It's not too bad. I want to talk about something that I don't know is public. Let me look this up really fast. Okay, I don't know if this is public. Yeah, I'll say two things. One is Google has some resources for helping with this. And two is that Go was specifically designed for simplicity. And I watched a great video on this. I actually just added it to my notes. It was Rob Pike. Here it is. This video. So Rob Pike, I believe Go was created by 3 people at Google. I'm not positive on that, but I'm nearly positive Rob Pike was one of them. And so this video I just linked in is about, I think, like 27 minutes. It's very consumable even at 2x speed. You don't really need to take notes or anything. But the point of the video is the simplicity behind complexity. Or sorry, vice versa. The complexity behind simplicity. So Go is a relatively simple language, but it's not like that was just achieved for free. There are a lot of hard problems I had to solve, both in just designing the language and then in implementing the language. And that means that there are certain paradigms in Go that you don't have 6 different ways to do it, for example, and you don't need to interact with the garbage collector. So if you're interested, this is something interesting to watch. But yeah, I don't think it takes too long to get sort of up to speed and go. Considering developing a project on my own, I believe I have the capabilities. I can face any difficulties. What I lack is the end goal, something to fight for. I'm not interested in being rich. I don't have an ego to prove I'm better than others. How can I find my purpose? This is a pretty interesting question. I think that what I would ask myself is what motivates me? So if I were to do a project, what is the interesting part? And it sounds like, from what you've said, it's more about the journey than the destination, which I think is great. I might be summing this up incorrectly to make it sound better. But if that's the case, then it almost doesn't matter what project you pursue. Because you're not out to prove anything. You don't necessarily need it for a portfolio. You don't need to make money. And so just keep, I always say like learning and having fun are kind of the most important things when you're getting started learning programming. I would say maybe you just focus on the fun aspect. Just treat it like it's a hobby. What's my typing speed? Yeah, check out the WPF commit. Do you think COVID's making it harder for you to get acclimated to Google? 100% yes. Yes, 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 yes. 500% yes. So, okay. If you were at an office and you had any random question, you have like a million routes for asking that question that have almost nothing to do with work. as in you're about to enter the office because you just got done biking there, and you see a coworker and they say, "Hey, what's up?" And you're like, "Oh, nothing much. I was actually struggling with this problem." And then bam, you're talking on the problem. Like that happens completely organically, and there are lots of routes for that. You're going to lunch and that happens too. Those don't really happen when every time you talk to someone, not type to someone, every time you talk to someone has to happen through a webcam and like a meeting that you set up, or even just an impromptu, like, "Hey, you free to chat?" And you send them a link or whatever. Like you try to meet with them, and then they're just not even at their computer. You don't know that they're not there. Like you can't you don't have that avenue anymore. And so I feel like that's very tough. The other thing that's tough is there's no overhearing things. There are some things that I thought were a little strange about just kind of working in an isolation world. And yeah, if you're not in a meeting, like your computer is physically not connected to this meeting, how could you overhear something? And so you lose out on that ability of, hey, two coworkers are talking about a design problem, and you think, oh man, I already solved this problem, I could help them, or vice versa. It just doesn't happen anymore. I'm glad. No, yeah, glad. Try to find on a schedule. Could you sync these, or do you want the website GCal as the only source of truth? The problem with the Twitch schedule is you have to set it per day, as in like Mondays is when I stream at this time, and you can't say every other Saturday. So I'd only be able to set that it's Saturdays, and that's not actually true. So that's why I can't use that calendar. So yeah, unfortunately, but I think I have it underneath. I'm already muted. Let me see. I think it should be in schedule here. Yeah. So these couple of things. Yeah, the GCal is supposed to be the source of truth for that. It's a four-man multi-world. One of the players has a power outage. We're waiting to get... Oh, I see. Okay, ETA of 2 hours of that? I might be able to host you. Do you have any must-read software development books? I don't, Calvis, no. I am not really a voracious technical reader when it comes to books. I tend to consume articles, tutorials, sort of blog posts on things, read what other people have to say. And I think the reason for that is because I struggle with this problem of what's the importance of something. And when I read other people talking about it online, it highlights that a little bit better than books might. All right, unrelated question, why did GitHub change the pull request system? Trying to merge between two branches and acting weird. I actually am not familiar with this. How did they change it? Why do some people still use PHP? This is something that has, I'll use the word plagued. This is something that has plagued technology for a while, and I don't actually think it's a problem, which is why I think plague is a weird choice of word here. But you have, let's say you want to host a web server, and let's say it's literally just to print out the string hello world. You have probably like 60 different routes for doing this that are all equally good. And so saying Django is great, like why does PHP exist? Well, I think the easy answer here is legacy combined with users, which are kind of saying the same thing. Like people still use it, so why would they stop? Yeah, I think it's just that. Got a job at SpaceX. Congratulations, Steven. Thanks so much for your notes and advice. Super excited. That's awesome. Yeah. I think I'm saying this purely based on an outsider's perspective, but I feel like the employees at SpaceX are all very passionate about their work. That's my stereotype that I have. So, yeah, and it sounds like you're excited. I hope that excitement continues and that you really like your job. Hey, Playing Risky, it's going well. How are you doing? Don't see you often. If you thought I was just not working for a while, take a vacation for 2 or 3 months, do your hobby and have fun. I don't know if this is in response to someone in particular. I would think Professor Wannabe, but this might be about something else. In which case, I don't have the context anymore. Sorry about that. Oh, if you are talking to me, yeah, I kind of did that for like 5 years. Yeah, my history is all very visible on Twitch. If you were to go, actually, you know what? I guess the easiest way is you go to hire.adamlearns.com. I'm not available for hire right now, but this talks about a lot of. I'll just link this in the chat. This talks about a lot of what the last 5 years were for me, and so it was many thousands of hours on Twitch. It was a fun time. I really liked it. Hey, Blu-ray King, it's going well. Yeah. Interesting times. Yeah, I want the grapes directly into my mouth. Cut out the middleman of the plate. Strongly disagree. If I learned to code without ever writing any code, trial and error, and just read a book, I would 100% not be where I am now. Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I don't think people learn by the just reading a book part. But I think in a more specific sense, I was talking about just sort of the mechanisms for learning of how you take in knowledge, how that knowledge is organized, what methods reinforce that. And then I think everyone has their own techniques that end up being effective, not because of the science behind learning, but because of the motivation aspect, and how really almost all learning is kind of a combination of motivation and time. Any topic you could learn, like almost all the resources are out there now, and it's mostly just do you want to, and do you have the time to afford for it. But anyway, this is not supposed to, like I said, I want to know the science more behind this. I don't mean to say this as a contentious point. I should preface it with this is more food for thought of like maybe this is a possibility, and specifically about the person who was talking about learning JavaScript over the course of about a year. Hey, Mom and Dad. I like the way you take time to answer each question now. And when I watch, I'm reading the behind chat in full screen. The group potential to help is limited. That is true. Yeah, I guess this does turn into more. Yeah, let me write this stuff down because I am definitely interested in this. So it sounds like the pro is kind of the pro that I listed, which is the thoroughness, and that the con is the sort of inability to help as a group because you have to wait for me to get to that point, and then by that time you've like 15 minutes have elapsed. Yeah, I'll have to think about this. Copy some more of this stuff. Does my website have RSS? Yeah, it should. If you go to where even is it? Oh yeah, right there at the very bottom, the RSS symbol. I did that one day and then just forgot about it basically. You can write a script to grab questions out of chat and put them in a queue, then answer questions from the queue while looking at chat in real time. That's true. Yeah, maybe I should try something like that. Yeah, I think there are always going to be pros and cons for any system that I choose. So something, I'll have to try it out. I shouldn't talk about this too much without having tested anything. Like you're taking the time to answer people more thoroughly than low latency. It's kind of up to the question maker. Yeah, I'll write this down. Hey Cubic, might help if there's some obvious visual indicator on screen showing us how many minutes behind you are on questions. Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, because okay, I'll write this stuff down. Maybe we can spend some time working on this. Bit of an off-topic question. Do you have any thoughts on cryptocurrencies in games? In games? Oh man, I think one game that did this, and I would categorize it as like total scam. So I have a feeling that extends to other games, but I don't know any popular games that use cryptocurrencies in them. And this one game actually, it had all of the signs of like a scam. So yeah, are there popular games that have cryptocurrencies in them? And I don't mean like you can buy the microtransaction stuff using a cryptocurrency. I don't think that fits. I think what this would have to be is the game is kind of based around this cryptocurrency. And every time I've ever seen cryptocurrencies being used for a platform, the platform always has to get huge for it to actually pay off for really almost anybody. So yeah, I don't have much knowledge about the effectiveness. Yeah, great video. Yeah, video is really good. Yeah, yeah. I think a more obvious signal. I know people can find this stuff. There's like the Atom time command, which hopefully is working. But in general, just FYI, it's 9:57 for me, and I'm looking at chat from 9:47, so I'm 10 minutes behind. How's work coming along? It's going well. It's going well. I was saying earlier, I think it'll be another few months before I feel really comfortable. Can't make out those timestamps. Yeah, that's the other thing. I could zoom in on this a little bit. Although I don't know if that's going to help. I still think there needs to be a better solution to this problem, and I'll have to look into it. There's a Go manager that devs on Go live on Twitch. Develops on the underpinnings of Go, basically, as opposed to developing using Go. I'll have to take a look at this. I don't tend to watch Twitch anymore. Thanks for your answer. Taking notes of your thoughts. Oh, nice. Okay, good. Yeah. Can't make use of the sleep pods and free laundry. I don't think there's free laundry in the Seattle area. But yeah, sleep pods. I definitely would have benefited from those at past jobs. Well, what happened at chat? It just scroll there. Okay. I'm 16 and won't start university for 2 to 3 more years. I've been coding since 2018. Can never stay in one language or CS field. Ever since I started coding, I've been following a weird cycle of web dev for 2 months. Then I go learn Unity, go back to web dev, then C. Cycle repeats. Don't have a goal. Do you think this is bad? I don't think this is bad. And the reason why I don't think this is bad is based on the kind of age and timeline you've given me. You're 16, so you started coding when you were roughly like 13 to 14. You've got another like 2-ish years to just kind of explore and experiment with whatever languages you want to get your hands wet with these things. And then what I think will probably happen is you'll go to university, you will get a lot more direction, and you'll already have the motivation that you have now, and you'll have that experience as well. And so this will hopefully hone some of these things that you've done. Before I got any formal education for programming, my coding was all very bad. And like you name it, I probably did some like bad pattern of something. My variables were all one name or one letter names. I'd have, something like this. And so then you'd see like B littered throughout the code and you'd say, what in the world, what is that? And it's because one, I was learning at a different time. But two, I just didn't know what the best practices were or why they mattered exactly. And this is where I think having that direction is so helpful, because let's say you were like 12 getting started right now and you just drilled in bad patterns for like 6 years. It can be somewhat hard to undo that, and you might end up having a little bit of an ego about it of like, well, I was fine up until university and now I'm here and it's not what they proposed. Like, I don't think I need to know this. So yeah, I think you're on a I think you're on a good path. And I think that as much as possible, maybe try to get a little bit of the direction beforehand. And this can come through any number of means. Let's say you found like people coding on Twitch. They will probably be a little bit more experienced in languages. They might be able to tell you why something is good or bad. And that way you can maybe steer a little bit. But if you find that many different languages are fun, yeah, keep doing it. Sounds like you're learning. Sounds like you're having fun. I think those are the important parts. Any Lydia courses? I don't think I've ever used Lydia as a site. So yeah, the question about recommendations for resources comes up a good chunk of time, and I never really have a solid answer because I don't know. Unless it's in my notes, I don't tend to find that it was that good. And I just don't consume that stuff. So for system design, for example, at the top of this, I do have a bunch of resources that I thought were pretty good. And probably even for things like Golang, yeah, I've got some resources at the top and just various things that I went through when I learned something. And so if it's not that very narrow subset of all knowledge out there, I can't really comment on it too much. So yeah, sorry, the answer is no. It's not a legacy though. I definitely use the wrong word. What I meant is there is already a base of people built up using this thing. I think legacy has more of a connotation of it's old code that just has to be maintained because it's still doing something. Yeah, and that's not exactly what I meant. It sounds like I'm backtracking now. I was just unspecific earlier. If you just want to print hello world, then that's it. Never change. I'd put an HTML file on a CDN. I don't know what this means. It's like the opposite of answering a question with a question. Yeah, I think that's true. I think they're sort of the best tools for these things. What I was commenting on was more so this sort of like general idea of there are 10 tools to do the same thing, and this generally vexes people. And I think it's because then they ask, okay, why does this tool exist? The number of times in my stream I've gotten like, why VS Code, or why Windows, or why really any technology that I've ever used. And what I think people are generally looking for when they ask that is, what are the pros, like what led you to this decision when there are so many of these choices out there? And sometimes it's as simple as like, well, that one looked the coolest, or I've been using this for a while, or I have a friend who knows this so they can help me with it. And that it's not some more compelling answer like, well, React does this and Angular does this, and this is provably better for my project. That'll happen some of the time. So I was definitely trying to talk at like a very general level here. Code and acclamation question. Last night I participated in something called Coffee Shop Chat. It was an attempt to recreate a coffee shop. This is the third time I think I've heard about this. Maybe you're talking about something a little bit different, but I'll talk about what I was thinking about when I finished reading this. Ways to be productive together. There's very little actual chatting. Interesting experience. Yeah, so people have tried these sorts of things at Google, and I think they haven't really worked. And I actually tried something too, where I tried bringing like sort of a streaming environment to my team, and it didn't really catch on, and people didn't really understand. And when I tried explaining, like, oh, hey, here's how it worked on Twitch, they're like, what does that mean? Like, why does this matter? What I thought you were getting at is this idea of a coffee shop chat. I've heard now a couple of companies doing this idea. Picture a blueprint of an office. Actually, let's just go find one. Give me a sec. Okay, something like this. I just pulled up the first random thing that popped up. So we have a blueprint of an office. You got chairs here, 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 here. There's whatever. There's a conference room or something. The applications I've heard of people using is that you have a little avatar in this world. And so you can like walk through the door, and as you get closer to where people are sitting, you can hear them through your headphones. But now you can't hear the people over here. So if you want to go talk to them, you have to move your avatar over to here in the world. And so this was an idea of getting people to have it feel a little bit more like a workspace. And that's what I thought you were talking about with this coffee shop environment of like, this could be a coffee shop and there are tables here and a bar area here or something. You could just walk around and sort of be around different people. I think it's interesting. I think these are the kinds of things where if we knew for whatever reason we were going to be isolated for another 5 years, that probably a lot of these technologies would take off. But that otherwise they'll probably find these sort of like niche spaces as the world, quote unquote, returns to normal. That's a very, very broad statement that I said there. Do I share my notes publicly? Yeah. And Rami linked them in here, the notes command. GitHub didn't change the PR merge system. They already had an option to fast forward or rebase or squash. Oh, I see. Thank you. Yeah. What's your suggestion on how to deal with situations where your colleague wants to chat with you, but you're busy on getting your work done? I love to help other devs in the team, but it's impeding my work getting done. So this is sort of a larger question of randomization and sort of like a queuing system as well. I think most people are fine with you just kind of laying out, here are my communication preferences. And I actually did this for my team when I joined. I asked them all, how do you feel about email? How do you feel about chat? And how do you feel about video meetings? And I just pretty much had them rate them all from like, you know, happy to angry. And I built a table for everybody on the team. And then I used that table myself. When they said that chat was like, no, that's for escalating. Like, don't do that. I wouldn't do that. And they got to communicate how they felt about this, and I don't feel like I was disrespected or anything. It's not like they were like, man, you got to stop doing this. Like, you're really bugging me or something. They just said like, hey, look, I don't prefer chat. I read through all my emails. Someone else actually said something really interesting. They said, my calendar is my North Star. So you put something on my calendar, I will have that meeting with you. And that's it. They just go by their calendar pretty much every single day. So I think you just need to send a signal out there saying like, I am more than happy to help. I don't find any of your questions to be frustrating or difficult. It's purely just the medium. If you were to send me a message over chat and you're fine waiting 10 minutes, if you, whatever, fill in the blank with whatever works for you there. But I don't think that's disrespectful. I think that's a good thing to send that out. Going well here, got a new gig, Blue Sky Studios. Nice, congratulations. After my West Coast internship ended, sounds like you got a cool gig at G. Did Botland get wrapped up? Haven't been around for like a year. Yeah, Botland wrapped up. The very short summary is on the site right here. It's just these like couple of sentences. I stopped actively developing it about a year ago, and then whatever it is, 4 or 5 months ago, I finally took it offline. So now there is no play.bot.land. This just doesn't resolve anymore. Yeah. It was a fun run, everybody. And it's a little bit sad, but also it had been causing me stress. There's still some maintenance involved. There's costs involved. But yeah. Anyway, thank you for the congrats, and congrats to you too. The 13531 doesn't really mean anything, and I know Randy linked in that command. Placing all of most in sentences tends to disarm. Yeah, I got to be careful about when I'm kind of speaking authoritatively on something or generally. A lot of what I see this stream as, this stream is whatever value you guys get out of it. And so if speaking in generalizations helps you realize something of, wow, I'm on track, like I can do this, then awesome. And when it leads to sort of more granular conversations, I think that's when I kind of pump the brakes and say, okay, that's not exactly what I meant. Like I am trying to get you guys to whatever goals you might have. What project do you find interesting? Do you think writing a web framework or library to help other developers would be interesting? What I find interesting has definitely varied quite a lot over the years. Like at almost any point in my career, I would have said games are pretty interesting to me, and I also think efficiency tools are pretty interesting to me. Writing libraries, writing frameworks, I think can be fun and can be interesting, and I think it all kind of depends on the domain. So like a web framework, I think I think that'd be neat. I don't tend to have anything in mind right now. And I also kind of steer toward these sort of interesting but useless projects. Like the typing on a piano thing. Am I even what shows up when this shows? Yeah. Yeah, this typing on a piano. I think I have this. This was just some like random little project I did with no real purpose. And I don't know. I just like these sorts of things. And I think they're cool, but they don't really provide any value. All right, the learning session. The book Grit is really good work on building expertise. Effort counts twice. Talent times effort equals skill times effort equals achievement. I see. Yeah, this general idea, I haven't heard it phrased this way. But what I have heard is like hard work kind of trumps intelligence. I think a lot of people, you're, again, I'm not speaking authoritatively here. I feel like you're sort of born with the intelligence that you get. You're not born with the knowledge, of course. You gain a lot of knowledge over your life. But in general, I think your IQ probably stays roughly the same. Let's just say that's true. Even if it's not, I still think hard work matters more than anything. And then a lot of people fall back to like, man, I'm not as smart as somebody else. So I'm just never going to be as good. And then you see these really inspiring stories about people who just overcome all odds to do something. In general, though, when I think it comes to software engineering, the majority of the time you'll see projects succeed is when there was just hard work behind them. Like, sure, there's going to be some luck in that equation. Sure, there's going to be some talent. There's going to be some intelligence in the equation. There's going to be some amount of like, how much money could you throw at the problem? But in general, someone out there had to do some hard work. And I think having that as your North Star for this, everyone can apply hard work. Not everyone can necessarily have the resources to go fund a company or will get the luck or the opportunities. But we can all put in the time and the effort. You have anything like a book or some poster articles to learn about crypto and encryption? No, I don't, unfortunately. The the stuff that I've done on stream has always been a very minor intersection through that. So, yeah, I don't think you'd find much through my notes on that. Didn't Minecraft launch a mine coin? Did they? Okay, this I want to look up really fast. Redeem mine coins. Whoa, is this a cryptocurrency? In-game currency you can use. Do they mention crypto on this page? No, I think this is just an in-game currency. Yeah, I don't know if it's a cryptocurrency. Hey, Jupiter. Do you have situations where you return to something you already learned, but this time you see it a lot more? You see a lot more, and you feel like you don't know enough. Like next attempt is much more efficient. Oh yeah, definitely. I feel this way. The thing that comes to mind first is piano. Actually, I feel like when I was learning it, there were some things where I just thought like, oh man, I don't get why this is that way. And part of the reason why is because when I was learning it originally, I didn't really have any music theory behind it, and now I have a lot more music theory. And so when I see something, I think, oh, this is just a fancy way of writing like an E flat major chord or something. There's just a lot of arpeggiation, and so you don't necessarily need to know. Okay, finger goes here, 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 here. You just remember. Oh, yep, okay, E flat major, and then even if you play the wrong notes, it's still the right chord. So yeah, I think that can help out a lot. Is revisiting something that you thought was difficult after maybe even a couple of years of having more knowledge in between. Hey, please compile. And hey, Kojin. How close to things? How close to how things are at Google did you kind of imagine it to be before you started? Like my expectations then versus now. So 3 months ago versus now. Oh, that is tough because I got to think back to what I was expecting. So I think my biggest expectation that I had is that I would ramp up faster than the average person. And the reason why I thought this is like last year was almost purely about learning. But what I learned is everyone's circumstances are different. So I'm joining during isolation. I was joining during, whatever phase in development we're at, with the certain people we're at, however new the team is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all these things combine to form a how happy are you, how well are you doing outputs to these. So that expectation, you can't even quantify it. You can't even say like, am I where I should be? Because all you really have to go on is, well, here's where other people were, but they have different circumstances. So how do you say that this was right for your circumstances? And it's sort of like, take any branch in your past. 5 years ago, you could have done X, but you chose Y. What would your life have been like if you'd chosen X? You have no idea, right? Like that, you have a vague idea of, oh man, if I'd gone into biology instead of computer science, then I probably would have ended up here. But like, no, maybe you would have just dropped out of biology and gone right back to computer science. You never know how that stuff will work. So yeah, I think in general, it's roughly what I expected, except that I shouldn't have expectations around the speed at which I'm doing things, how quickly I'm getting comfortable. And that's a lot of what led to the imposter syndrome post that I made. Happy Saturday, Goose. The grapes on a plate thing was just, I don't know if you've ever seen Futurama, but there's Hedonism Bot. Do they show, yeah. So, oh, wait, I don't want this to be, yeah. So this robot was supposed to just represent hedonism and all the luxuries in life and is always walking around with plates and is just feeding itself grapes all the time. That's not a common expression. I think that was more of just a joking thing. The getting your feet wet or your hands dirty just means you're getting into something. So looking at code is different from the getting your hands dirty and like actually messing with that code. Just be emoji. I think some languages nowadays will let you actually make this a proper variable name. I don't think JavaScript is one of them. Yeah, this is a new chair, and I don't have a command for it, but it's a secret lab chair. You had to choose a backend language right now for either cloud or on-premise. Would you choose TypeScript or rather Golang? Hey, Ryan. And by the way, I'm 13 minutes behind on chat for anyone wondering. So it's 10:15 for me. I'm responding to things at 10:02. I always think about it. There are other variables that come into this, like what's the team doing? What do they know? Or is it just me? What do I know? And so I haven't used TypeScript as much as I've used Golang. So I'd probably steer toward Golang. I'm also relatively interested in seeing how Golang works if I were to start something from scratch for a backend. So I generally find it to be an interesting language right now. So just from that point of view, I'd probably choose Go, but I don't think that's a transferable answer. Like, I've got my own kind of personal reasons. Sounds kind of like an email. Dear Rhyme, I'd choose Go. Adam. There, send. Hey, Darkmoon. Darkmoon, your name sounds familiar, but I don't know why it sounds familiar. Hang on one sec. Yeah, I don't know why your name sounds familiar. I don't know when I should add you or not. Oh, don't worry about it. A lot of chat is like bright red for me because of how many people are tagging me in messages. So I need VR spatial audio. And yeah, the RE pattern is helpful on its own. I think it's definitely helpful for giving context. That's so weird. That's wild. Yeah, and by the way, the context for this is the virtual chat setting. I haven't tried this out, but I've heard about people trying it. It does sound kind of interesting because it's applied to a niche already of probably people who know each other. I don't think this is meant to just be VR chat, but it is VR chat for the office, which is pretty interesting. Sounds like Mozilla's web VR thing that was used. Oh, they tried this out too? It's ending in 2020. I mean, I hadn't heard of this before this year, so that means it probably is pretty new. Or just that I have my, head in the sand. Hey, Romania. Hey, Mike Sty. It's going well. Just thinking Apple's idea to only have one set of bathrooms, so employees are sort of forced to walk past each other throughout the day. There's so much knowledge transfer that I feel happens in the office, and it's really, really hard to think back for me to what was a concrete time when I learned something based on a conversation in the office. And the reason why is because the last time I was in the office before this, 2015. But otherwise, it'd probably be easier to come up with examples. But I'm sure there's something. And even if there isn't something, I know for sure that I got to know coworkers better by just like running into them in the kitchen or something and just saying like, hey, what's up? And then they tell me about something and I think, oh wow, we have that in common. And just that doesn't happen when you're not talking to them at all. It can't happen. You gotta have some vehicle for communication. Oh, I was more joking. Okay, good. Yeah. Always a little hesitant about this. Like someone said I can't decide between using X or Y, and I responded with HTML file and a CDN. It's not answering a question. Mm, yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. And okay, glad to see we're on the same page, I think. Why are you using Chrome? I'm guessing this is when I was saying the why are you using X, and that this isn't a serious question, so I won't answer this. But if it is a serious question, just ask me again. Hey, Quinn. You just let Botland age on the mobile stores. I think it's 2021, thinking 2030. Who knows what can happen? Yeah, the problem is, though, it does need servers behind it in order for it to be a functional game. And those servers cost money, and they require some maintenance from time to time. And people would also probably find some bugs or exploit some strategies or something, and then I need to fix those. And I'd be like, this is just a hassle at this point. But yeah, I would love that idea if it were a single player game. Just leave it online. What's next for a new CS graduate student whose coursework does not yield projects to showcase? A lack of concrete projects seems to be the reason why I can't land an entry level position. This is pretty tough. And hi, Marty. I think that in general, what you need to probably do is build a portfolio. And yet, since your projects don't suffice for that portfolio, it's basically like start new projects. However, there is probably a way that you can convert your project work you've already done into a video or something, or pictures. I don't know what the work actually is, into your portfolio. So I've done this before for some of the, actually, I guess they were games, so they kind of made for good videos anyway. But for some of the games that I had made that I felt like I'm not going to host this on the internet, so I just did a video saying like, here's what I did, here's what it was about, and I think it was pretty good. So even if what you've got is just code, you can still do a video of like, here's what I developed, here's what it's about. The last time I did something like this, I think it's, what did that button even do? I don't know. I think that I've got something on here. Yeah. This is what I did last time. And I'll link this video to you. This was my portfolio walkthrough. Granted, I have a somewhat visual portfolio. But I went over, okay, here's my site. You don't even need to click it. Here's what this game was about. Again, you don't need to look through anything. Here are the features of it. So this is something you could do for almost anything. Like, here are what my responsibilities are. It's like a video walkthrough of your resume at that point. And I think if you get a little bit creative with it, that'll help. And then if you can't do that for whatever reason, then yeah, starting new projects. What was I going to say? Massaging what you have into a project. I think that could be good. Ordered a USB cable for my piano. Looking at doing some shenanigans. Did you get a USB to USB cable, or did you get a USB to MIDI? Because these generally suck. There are a lot of like bad manufacturers, and you'll find that they don't really totally work. And that, yeah, hopefully yours doesn't have those problems, I guess. Hey, Athalia. Example similar to a coffee shop coding. Sounds like Hello My Uko's channel. She has music and a Pomodoro timer. Yeah, I think Twitch on its own has been great for this kind of thing. So a lot of people, I sent out a straw poll years ago, and I said, like, why do you watch my channel? And some people said for learning, some people said for Botland itself, some people said for the community. But I think the biggest one was just background noise. It was like, hey, someone's working, they're being productive, there aren't going to be any like loud changes in volume. You can generally expect that there's just going to be some voice on in the background talking about software engineering in some capacity. And when something strikes your fancy, you look over and you participate for a little bit. And I think that is kind of tapping into just humans are social creatures. We want to kind of be around someone, but sometimes we don't want the responsibility of really being around real people. So yeah, I think Twitch on its own has been great for that. Unfortunately, when it comes to like X product for the office, so you think of like VR chat, you think of Twitch, I think Twitch is really hard to do for an office setting. As in streamers who are at your office. So your intelligence is the bottleneck. Yup. Any jobs or salary at JB? I'm assuming it's jobs. I'm not sure if it means something else. Or salary negotiation tips. Just got lowballed this week by a recruiter. Yes, I have an essay that I found. But let me see if I can find it again. 7,000 word negotiation essay. Essay on negotiation. No, it's not that one. Where is it? Okay, hang on. Let me just turn this off for a sec while I go look really fast for, I know for sure how to find this. Here it is. And I will paste it in the chat in a second. Okay. Yeah. So this link might help you. Who had asked this question? Quinn. Yeah. Okay, and then let's load this up. So this is from 2012. I think it holds up still, and it is very long. So I think this is really good. This drills in why you should negotiate, a little bit about how you should negotiate. I think it's an essay worth reading, and those are all the tips I could possibly ever have. And I'll need to make a command about this, by the way. Make a command about... Actually, you know what? Do I have one already? I'll just add one really fast. No, I don't. Okay, let's add one. Negotiation. Adam highly suggests this essay on negotiating salaries. It's very long. There. Doing a Python course right now. And by the way, I know I've been saying this a bunch of times, but I am behind on chat by like 14 minutes. So I'm trying to read through everyone's messages and give answers to all this stuff. Doing a Python course right now to learn the basics. After completing it, what do you think would be a good thing to work on? I have a command in chat, the learn command, and it takes you to a blog post I wrote. And so when in this how to go about learning, you're doing the beginner course. Awesome, that's great. And then when it comes to a project, don't I have this written down somewhere? Ah, yes. At some point early on, you'll probably ask, what project should I work on next? So that's this whole section that comes up. And this is all my advice. I wrote this blog post, so I suggest taking a look through that. Yeah, I know, Soda. It is sad. I learned a lot. For anyone who hasn't heard my little like postmortem or journey, first of all, there is a postmortem command you can type. You can read all about it, but I'll give you the short story. Botland lasted for like 4 years. And so at the like 4.1 year mark, I was crushed because I felt like, man, those 4 years kind of went down the drain. And then I got out of all that negativity and I feel how I feel now, which is I am intensely grateful for those years that I had. I learned a ton. I met a lot of cool people. I got to do something that's always been a life goal of mine. So it's sad on one hand, but on the other hand, I'm very proud of what I did. And I'm glad it worked out the way it did too. I mean, obviously it would have been better if everything was like a massive success and I don't know. But I'm still very happy about it all. Hey, Funky Monkey. Funky Monkey, I referred someone your way. I got a private message from somebody, and I don't know if you got a message, but they said, hey, who was the designer for your site? And I'm like, that was Funky Monkey. Go hire him. Here's why my Google command can't be thorough, and here's why my notes command doesn't answer your request for resources. I feel like I've heard these explanations a lot. Yeah, and so define evil, I am writing these things down. The Google command not being thorough is in that document, and then I just end up talking about it too because that doesn't come up too much, I feel. But the notes and resources thing, I'll write that down. Hate the new PogChamp stuff. What is PogChamp today? I haven't even... Oh, it's this one. Okay. Yeah. Do you have any opinion on crypto called BAT in Brave browser? Do you invest in any crypto? BAT is what? Brave Attention Token? I think that's a pretty cool idea, actually. I quite like that idea because I feel like it's a pretty safe, kind of cool way of doing things. So for those who don't know, and I might be explaining this poorly because I don't really use Brave browser, but Brave browser is another browser, and I think they focus on security and something about advertisers. Anyway, every time you go to a site, every time you interact with an ad, I think they give you a Brave Attention Token or a fraction of one. And then you can convert this into real money for people you want to support on the web. So for example, I think I have like a BAT address, and I don't think you should use that at all. I should probably disable that or something. I think that's pretty cool. But no, I don't invest in any crypto. I don't really, I'm not like a very financially savvy person. Can you play the Botland theme song when Moan the Silence? All the new PogChamps are absolutely awful. They look nothing like the original. Yeah, I like Komodo Hide. I haven't seen all the different PogChamps though. Just knitting on. Yeah. I know what you're saying. Yeah. How important is it to attach a privacy policy page to the footer? I mean, it's a personal blog post. I don't think it's super important. I think privacy policies become important in a couple of cases. One is like a massive audience. Then it probably doesn't matter too much. The other is making money. And then the other is taking in data. So if someone's just visiting your blog post, you don't have analytics running on the page or anything, you probably don't need a privacy policy. With that said, it doesn't hurt to have one. And I actually think I have some notes on how to write a privacy policy. Give me a sec. No, the notes are private. Yeah, the notes are private. I don't think I can make these public exactly either because yeah. Anyway, I looked into a bunch of different things. I actually hired a lawyer to make my original privacy policy. Let me get back to, sorry, what I was doing here. There we go. Okay. Starting my first job on Tuesday as a software engineer intern. It's going to be 7 months and 100% remote. Looking forward, but not at the same time, you know what I mean? Well, why is the not looking forward to a part happening? Is it because of the remote aspect? Is it because of the responsibility? Is it because of some fear? Because you can't really, it can't not be remote. There are certain things that come along with that, but I think those can be mitigated. But yeah, you can't ever get rid of this completely. But these you can definitely address. But yeah, that's nice. I hope the job goes well. How do you hang out with your coworkers during a remote setting? Yeah. And so people set up like lunch meetings or morale events or something, but it's still not exactly the same as just these impromptu 3-minute conversations you have about like the rocket launch that happened. You know, anything. Have you thought about letting the community optimize it? I've thought about this. Even the work it takes to open source this is probably massive, and I don't think much would come out of it. So I think for now it's solidly in the history territory, and that maybe at some point in the future that changes, but it's not really on my radar right now. Man, has Google provided anything extra for your home office over the COVID isolation lockdown? Yeah, they had some stipend that they gave out for improving your work setup. And so like that's how I got this chair, for example. And there are a couple other little things that had changed. I know I've shown this off before, but I'll show you this. Non-work mode. Oh, did I not call it that? Regular mode. I've shown this on stream, but like this is what I do before meetings. Oh, well, not that's what I do after meetings. It switches back into like, I'm just living in this room now. Work mode. So there were some pieces of that setup that were done through some of that stipend that was provided, and like I don't know, I think it's made this a lot more comfortable to work at for home and work setup. I passed M Perry. No hello for current M Perry. Oh, is this actually a serious question? Okay, so I was using Chrome for a while. There was more of a browser war going on back when Chrome came out, and Chrome was, I would say, demonstrably faster than all the other browsers at that point. And then I think, obviously, a lot's happened. This was probably like 2011, 2012. I don't actually remember when Chrome came out. And then the browsers got a little bit more parity with each other. There are still extensions that I wanted out of Chrome, I think. And maybe Firefox has them now. It's just never been an important enough reason for me to switch. That's about it. And like I've customized Chrome quite a lot at this point too. Hmm. Yeah. And I think this is really important. If you've never worked from home before, you probably have a bad setup for working from home just for extended periods of time. Whether it comes to your microphone for talking to other people, your chair for the ergonomics of not destroying your back throughout the day. There's probably something you can improve there. I think it's nice. Oh, good. You got a USB connector. Yeah. Good, good, good. Yeah, me using Chrome doesn't have to do with me working at Google. Like I still use Bing. If I were to just type test into my address bar, it's going to Bing. Like I used some Google products beforehand, and I used some competitor products, I would say, and I haven't really switched away from the competitor products. So, for example, OneNote, I've always loved. I use it for all my personal stuff, but yeah, at work I can't do that anymore, so I use Google Docs. And yeah, Chrome I always used. I've had an Android phone since like Android came out, basically, except for one Windows phone I had. That was a mistake. The phone itself was fine, but there were no apps for it. Yeah, this is the essay. Thank you. Yeah, and I eventually found it too. I hadn't scrolled down far enough. Hey, Programmer D. Hope you got enough sleep. All right, what else have we got? I'm able to catch up on chat. Hey, Flying Me, I'm doing well. How's it going for you? Will you mention these streams in your Google Perf cycle? No, I don't think so. I don't think this is providing any value for Google. I don't think I'm taking anything away from Google, but I don't think this does anything for Google. Like, I'm not really advertising anything. I'm not I'm not acting as an official representative. What made you want to start streaming? To be background noise? So this is the wrong reason. But the reason why I actually started was I saw someone stream development and thought they did a bad job. That was pretty much it. I thought, man, I could do better than this. And that's I think what was the precipitating moment. And then it turned out to be pretty fun and beneficial, and I just kept doing it. But yeah, I got in for the wrong reason, for sure. Started my first development job, having a hard time gauging what's expected of me. My senior is very laid back, says everything is good, but it feels like I'm not doing anything difficult, and I'm worried. Yeah, okay, I felt this exact same way pretty much last week, and I've been in many different development jobs now. So, I will say this. You should read this. This is the blog post I wrote like 2 days ago, because I just felt this, and I like worked through this myself. And then second, I think you should put a little bit more stock into your senior's advice, or like just words, not even necessarily advice. Like, they say everything is good. You have no reason to believe that it's not good. Everything else is going to be just trying to convince yourself about that. So go through these thought experiments a little bit, but also recognize this is your first development job. Like, think about this. Here's another thought experiment I didn't write in that blog post. Let's say it's 20 years in the future. You've been at this for a long time. You've started a company. You've got 30 employees, and now you're going to hire someone new, and they're a junior developer. Basically, the polar beat from 20 years ago. Would you give them responsibility that if they mess up, that your business is going to be destroyed and you'll be like the other 30 employees will be out of a living? Like, no, you're going to give them something that'll help them grow, that's appropriately scoped, and you're going to give them someone to help them out, which you have in the form of the senior person you mentioned, and then touch base with them and see if they're on track. And that's what's happening. So I don't think you have any reason to worry. And like, this is an exciting time. It's your first development job. I think as much as you can do to combat this feeling of like, I'm not doing anything difficult, nothing's really started yet. Like, you said you just started. I don't know how long ago that was, but cut yourself some slack. Don't be your own worst enemy. And yeah, do check out that blog post. By the way, I make no money from this like blog post being up. There's no ads in it. There's no like affiliate link. I think I even messed up my Google Analytics that I have, so I'm not even getting like stats from this. So I'm saying this purely for people's value, not mine. It's 4 years of botland and I met his hero, me. No cap. Did you? Never mind. I don't need to follow up to this level, I guess. But I was curious if they had reached out to you. Can't remember where I followed this, but I think it was because of the vast knowledge of streamer has. Cool. So, how do you know that when you're ready to transition to a senior software engineer? I don't think this happens like how a Pokemon evolves. You know, you hit level 18 and all of a sudden there's a transition screen. It's like, do you want to become a senior engineer? Press B if you don't. Like, it's a very gradual transition that happens. And at no point can you say like, I wasn't senior yesterday and now I'm senior today. Doesn't work like that. So how do you know you're ready to transition? Well, okay, you might be talking about job title, in which case it does work like a Pokemon evolution, and then now you are a senior engineer. But the actual skills behind it are something that happens gradually. So how do you know you're ready is basically when either at your job you feel like you've been promoted to roughly that level, and now you have to make the decision of, do I make the next step? Do I work toward the next promotion? Or when you're applying to new jobs and they kind of level match you to senior positions. They say, oh, this position requires 8 years of industry experience, and you need to have used this technology and this technology. You're like, yeah, I meet all those things. So those are the more easily gaugeable properties of being a senior engineer. But in general, yeah, know that it's gradual. Privacy policy notes being private. Well, it was more like, if you've ever seen online, people give some advice and they say, I'm not a lawyer though. I'm not a lawyer. Don't take any of this. Like, don't hold me accountable. That's kind of how I'd feel about that. I've done some research. I've written a privacy policy. I've gotten a lawyer to do a privacy policy. And yet, if I were to give other people advice on doing it, I think that'd be very risky. So I'd have to give that caveat every time. Hey, Demon Wolf. Hey, Briars. How's your study and work ethic so good? What have you done to build it up to the point where you can sit, study notes for hours on end? I always want to learn new things, but never have the mental energy to put the time. Bored and as a constant fear, I'll just live life doing nothing more than the average person. Ooh, there's a lot to unpack here. So let's start with the final part. This fear that you'll never live life doing more than your average person, I think this is perhaps philosophical or preachy, but I think the goal for everyone is kind of happiness. And if you're happy as an average person and not doing anything more, then you've hit it. Like that's the goal in life. Like be happy, spread happiness. So, but that's like one little bit of this to unpack. How do you do this stuff? I talk about how discipline is the end goal and that motivation is kind of the start of getting there. And so how do you just get the ball rolling? Well, I think there's some amount of organization, figuring out what you like, and even just maybe you list out your goals. So think about this, like I want a dev job in 2 years, something like that. Or I want to work on this project, I want to learn X, whatever. These should be relatively easy to figure out because it's just what you want. It doesn't even have to be time specific. Just you could even just list out the first part of this. Like I want to make a game. Cool, awesome. Now you've got that idea. Then you've got to have some good habits toward developing that idea. And so what you start with, you have this. Now you need some like outline of how do I get there? And so probably there's some like design, prototype, you know, the typical like dev stuff if we're talking about that. And any of these are broken down very similarly. And then it's about setting aside that time to do it. And what I was saying earlier is I think a lot of people jump in just straight to the deep end. And then they find that they're overwhelmed and they back out and it was just an all-around bad experience. I think you need to ease yourself in as smoothly as possible. Treat yourself like you're the baby rage emote and you want to stop yourself from crying. Like, how would you do that? Well, you'd probably say, I don't want pressure. I want maybe some accountability booster. Maybe I get a buddy to join me. Maybe I write a blog post about it. Maybe I just share in Discord every week. Hey, here's what I did. And that's actually another powerful motivator here is extrinsic motivation. So motivation that comes from other people. Communities are great. They're relatively easy to find in the form now of subreddits, Discords, etc. You could go on Twitter, you can go on Facebook, you can probably find these a million ways, and they can help keep you accountable too. So just to kind of sum up here, it's all about getting started, and that getting started is going to seem like it's motivation, like it's kind of pushing yourself so that you can build up the discipline of, yep, it's Saturday, and I said I would devote some time Saturday to doing this. Now's a good time. I'm going to devote that time, and you feel like you're making progress. Windows Phone. Hey, Johnny, man. Hey, Nate. Hey, Adam. I'll be gone by the time you see this. But I've tried using OneNote several different times since I started watching you, and I can't stand it. It's not for everybody. I think OneNote certainly has some problems with it, too. One of the reasons I liked it, it was a differentiator at the time, which is that it was on every platform. It was synced, and it was, I'm pretty sure, free back then, too. Now you can probably find like 10 different note-taking programs that fit all of these because being on every platform is not so difficult nowadays. And syncing and it being free, well, I don't know. That probably varies a little bit. But yeah. How far behind am I now? I am 8 minutes behind. I'm catching up. Do you have any advice for improving as a mid-level engineer at work or in general? I feel like there's a lot of advice for getting started, but not a lot from going from good at coding to great. One of the things I see is that there are different tracks for engineering. So there is a track of being an individual contributor, and there's a track of sort of being a manager. And within individual contributor, there's more sort of coding oriented, I'd say, and then more design oriented. And first, you need to kind of figure out what track you want to go down necessarily, because you might get to the point where coding only accounts for like 10 to 20% of your job. And then maybe you want to start focusing on more design. But let's say it was just coding oriented. I think what you need to do is kind of that advice from earlier, like this was talking about. Paste this down here. Like learning different programming paradigms. So here's what I would say. Programming paradigms, design patterns, sort of more software. I'm going to say it is theory of like, how do you write maintainable code? And a lot of this has to do with testing, designing, how you release it, and what you value along the way, even kind of protecting your code. Maybe you learn about how hacking techniques work so that you can protect against them. All of these are going to lead to more resilient, more mature code. And unfortunately, none of that is so specific for me to say something like learn this design pattern or learn this programming language. But yeah, in general, it's going to be have a curiosity of where your gaps are and then how you might go about filling some of those in. Do you want to become a Google developer expert? I don't actually know what this means. A person recognized by Google as having exemplary expertise in one or more of their Google developer products. No, I don't think so. I'm only just learning about this term now. Oh, also, there are only 738 people, or 800-ish. Probably not. So there's sort of developer relations and developer evangelism. I haven't ever tried that job, but I don't know how it would be a good fit for me, and I think that's where these experts come in. Not sure though. Let me see what else it is. Tips you have for learning recursive descent parsing? I don't think there's anything specific for learning this that I have. I think I have some general tips though. And the general tips are, because a lot of people write recursive descent parsers as like a school project. And so I'd say look through GitHub code and then look for any tutorials you can find. And of course, if you're doing this for school, then I have this like talk to your colleagues and professors. And that's kind of it. So yeah, I don't have anything more specific than that. Yeah. Not afraid at all, just disappointed my only experience of development will be remote, which means significantly reduced social interactions. Yeah, I see. I know, I'm glad you like the resources. Yeah, unfortunately, like I said, remote is so difficult because it hasn't been for long enough for most people to have like a, here's definitely what's worked. We are at the point where, isolation hit like March of last year, and it's basically February right now, so we're approaching the 1 year mark that most companies would have had. 1 year is rarely enough to gauge whether something is working on a large scale, and companies are trying different things. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any like tried and true advice for here's how to make remote working better. And I'm struggling with it a little bit myself. I've worked remote for like 5 years on Twitch, but it was so different because I felt like the social interaction was not lacking whatsoever. I just spewed every single thought I had out into the world. You guys responded, and it felt like a normal office setting. Then I worked the real remote, which has been the last 3 months, where my coworkers are remote. I'm not just spewing every thought I have into the world. I'm spewing it to this cactus I have on my desk, and the cactus doesn't talk back to me. So I think it's tough. I think we need to invest in talking cacti. Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have more tips about that though, but I'm glad the other ones have helped you. Why was this held back? I watch you from time to time. When I first saw your stream, I was in high school, and now I graduated with a CS degree. I'm allowing this message. I don't know why that checkmark did nothing, but I'm glad. I appreciate that. That's awesome. Yeah, and this is something. Oh man, I was just talking to a friend last night about this. So I said that when I started programming, I didn't even really have like the internet to use. So I was reading from textbooks. It's not like the internet didn't exist. I didn't even have textbooks, or like I had a very different set of resources basically. And so it was hard for me to answer, am I on the right track? And it was hard for me to seek out these resources. And this is part of the reason why I'm doing this. But when I think to how have some of my viewers kind of grown as programmers, I know some people in here started watching when they were like 15 years old. And then they're now like 17 or 18, let's say, and some of them started streaming on Twitch. And I see the titles of their streams and it's like hacking the Linux kernel. And I think, wow, I wasn't doing that at 17 or 18. And that's amazing. And this is what I think is good. I feel like a lofty goal is for every generation to make sure the next generation has it better than they did. And yeah, if I can give you guys any bit of a boost to say, hey, I just shortcut even like 2 months of this path I was down. I was going to be really negative about this. Like Adam helped me think more positively, or I've got more direction that saved me from doing something else. Like awesome, that's great. So I think this is really cool. Congrats on graduating. How do I help myself? I lack motivation to do my personal projects. I have different ideas, but I just doubt myself to ever be able to start. if you're doubting yourself, I think this is another good candidate for this blog post that I wrote. The way I see this is there is infinite room to doubt yourself, but there's finite room to believe in your own accomplishments. And so I would say, like, grasp that finite space of your learnings and accomplishments and hold on to it. And that's what that blog post is kind of about that I linked to you. So I don't mean for this to just be the entirety of the advice that I have for this. The next thing is to, at some point, just start. And starting is always going to be scarier when the scope is large. So cut down on scope as much as possible. If you want to make a game, change it from World of Warcraft to like Pokemon, and then even shorter than that to like just the battle system in it or something. And then you'll feel like you made some progress. And you'll have something tangible that you can point back to and say, I'm proud of that work. I did that. And then you'll learn too what kind of scope you can tackle. And then once you've got a good gauge for what scope you can tackle, it's like slowly increase the scope with future projects. It's whenever you are, let's say you're working at like scope X and then you jump up all of a sudden that things become very tough to manage. So I was always interested in games. I was really interested in RPGs. I would always try to make these like, you know, whatever, like a Zelda-esque game. And I need to make a map editor for it. I need to make like some scripting engine or something. And it was like, why was I doing this? You know, if I wanted to make a game, just simplify the assumptions to the point where it's more doable. Then I'd have something I could look back on. But instead I have all these projects I worked on for like 6 months or a year and never ended up with something. It was still valuable. I still learned. I just didn't have anything to point to at the end. 2 months into the job. Yeah. That's early enough where I don't think you should feel like something's drastically wrong or I'm not getting the signals for how to improve or something. So yeah, you're probably on the right track. I hope the blog post helps. Make no money from blog. Sent you a Discord message about this. Oh, I'm not sure, and I'll check out the Discord message for sure. I should also say I'm not attempting to make any money off of the blog. Like, I think as much as I can make this stuff free, I should. And the reason why in the past, for example, I had like subscriptions on Twitch. The reason why is because I was trying to sustain myself off of this stuff. I have a traditional full-time job now that can sustain me, and so I feel like I shouldn't make money through this. And there are certain ways I can't turn it off right now. Like I get ad revenue through Twitch. I don't know how much that works out to. It's probably like $2 a month or something. I don't really care about turning that off. But yeah, everything else I felt like you guys shouldn't have to spend money. What's wrong with a comma? It's close to coma. It thinks you're going to put people in a coma. Hey, Sam. A lot of non-tech companies use just a title. Go for it. I think even in some tech companies, it's probably just a title. But yeah, go for it is generally what I would say too. How can I improve my note-taking and self-documenting? I struggle to be able to structure my notes. This is a lot of practice and observing the qualities of good notes. So what notes have you liked? What resonated with you? Because I found what worked for me, and I think I've got an example here. Let me see if I did this with the Kubernetes notes. Yeah, this style I have absolutely loved when I've gone back and read my notes, which is there are two major properties here. One, it's peppered with links. Like you can hardly look through a paragraph without seeing blue on the screen. And that means that if I ever want to find out more, I just click one of these things and find out more. The other thing that you'll see, this is another quality that I've really liked, is there are very short headers for what this thing is, typically just a bolded start to a bullet point. And that way when I'm like, oh man, what was, I don't know, deployment or something, I can just kind of scroll down and see. There's one other thing I've kind of started to do with some of my notes that get a lot longer, which is alphabetize these. These are things that I feel like the note-taking program should do, and that I haven't actually ever looked into setting that up so much. But in general, if I were ever looking for this, I'd just search. That's why it's not such a big deal, you know? But yeah, find what properties you like and then try to emulate those. And yeah, it's going to take a lot of practice, and it's going to take a lot of looking back at those notes and realizing I don't have that and I wanted that. I have a blog post on note taking, but it's not exactly what you might want. Oops. And one of the most impactful properties from this is a technique that I learned reading about cleaning. So let's say you're looking for your what's a good thing? Okay, I have glasses cleaner on my desk, right? Like, let's say I had a set of drawers and I can't find this, and I look in the first drawer. If it's not there, that's where it needs to be when I finally found it. So that same thing applies to notes. You're looking for a note. I just typed in deployment, right? And I didn't see it. Imagine if I actually needed this. I don't right now. But wherever I looked for it, that's where it needs to be at the end. Like, that's where I should put it, because in the future, that's what I'm going to do when I look for it. I think that's helped out a lot. What's the meaning of work for you? Working for yourself versus for other people? If you have both opportunities at hand, which one do you choose? I think everyone has intrinsic motivations that they almost can't change. And so for me, for whatever reason, working for myself is probably always going to be better than working for someone else. And I say this not just from an isolated perspective of this is literally the only variable, but I mean everything that comes with that. So working for someone else generally means more job security. It probably means more salary. It probably, there's like a lot of other things, maybe a team of talented individuals. And I'm saying I would forego probably most of those benefits if I got what I needed to be able to sustain myself by working for myself. So for me, that's just where I align on that. But everyone's different there. And everyone wants different sort of pros and cons out of this. Some people, maybe the thing they value the most is just like a low commute. And then it's like, who cares what the job is? I just don't want to be spending 2 hours traveling somewhere. Like, yeah, so find something that fits that. Hey, Goose, man. Any note-taking apps you guys in chat? Yeah. Feel free to suggest them. How'd you learn these things? Books? Just passive experience? I think it's a combination of... So I don't tend to use books too much for this stuff, but it's just seeking out the information, which first is identify the gaps, and then the second is be open to filling them. So identifying the gaps is like, ooh, I've never used a functional programming language before, let's say. So then you think of, well, how can I work on that? And that's pretty easy. You go use a functional programming language and you learn. And then maybe you think of something like, oh man, I keep finding myself, I run in these problems, I need to learn more design patterns. So then you go seek out some design pattern information. So in my mind, that high level is not the difficult part. It's figuring out what those gaps are. I think that can sometimes be tough. You need to know where you've struggled in the past or where you've written buggy code. And then for filling them, it's like, well, this thing was a gap for a reason. You didn't have time, you didn't have the energy to focus on it, maybe you didn't have the motivation to, so it'll probably be a little bit tough to do. But I think that's how you end up growing, is trying to mindfully pursue those gaps. I think being good at a job and liking the job are certainly two different things, and they're both worth considering. And this is basically the plot to Good Will Hunting, or at least what I took from the plot. You have this mathematician who's great at math, but who doesn't really want to do it. And like, do they owe anything to the world to do that thing that they're great at? And I don't know, I bet there's like some way you can scope this down to get to the point where the answer is yes. But in general, I think what's going to motivate me the most is certain properties of a job. And yeah, being able to help people, I think is part of it. Feeling like I'm making an impact. The salary's in there to some extent, but this all kind of depends. There's some amount of like ownership, and then there's plenty of other things that I'm just not listing here. Hey, Aaron. Long time. Nice to see you stream again. Helping you be productive. Nice. Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad. I like the stream format. Yeah, this is the second one we've done like this, and I think as we continue to do this, because just like I said, there are properties I'm looking for out of a job, there are properties I'm looking for out of a stream. And the stream was this part here, being able to help people, and then also not having it feel like work. So what I suspect, and this is what I think has been such a challenge for the stream in general, is that I've got group mentoring number 1, group mentoring number 2. What happens when we get to number like 7 or 8, and I feel like I'm just seeing the same topics, I've written all the blog posts I can write, I'm still helping people, but now it feels like work. And then the question becomes, then what? And I don't have an answer to that. So we're playing this by ear. I feel like there's been a lot of flux with the stream in the last year. Last year started with Botland, went to Adam Learns, went to Interview Prep, and then went to nothing. Radio silence, because I got a job. So now we're in the group mentoring phase, and then we're going to get to who knows what. So as long as this is helping for now, I still feel like doing this. I think this is good. Yeah, then I'm not sure what'll happen. Does Google do a lot of pair programming? I think it's all based on the teams. It's hard for me to say whether it's like a company wide thing or whether it's part of the culture. It's all based on the team, and there are probably contexts where it makes more sense than others. So I haven't really done any at Google yet. Maybe a working from home blog post, maybe not. Though, what are your thoughts? Thoughts on the next blog post, I think, always come up from the kinds of things that are talked about in chat. So I'm not sure actually. I'll have to think about this because the other thing, as I mentioned, I don't want this to exactly feel like work. And writing that blog post, even the one on imposter syndrome that I just wrote, that probably took about 2.5 hours. So it's not like these things are short. I want to make sure I'm putting in the right amount of effort and giving value for these things. Yeah, bad cactus. Go learn English. Yeah, I don't know how that got there. Yeah. Oh, you already accepted it? Ah, yeah, 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 yeah. Huh, strange. How can I become as beautiful as you? It's a potion of immortality. You'll need the philosopher's stone. Your yesterday you is the only thing you should be comparing yourself against. Yeah, Robert Tables. I think this was a really like. I think it's a healthy way of looking at things in that I would always compare myself against other people and say, "Am I where I should be?" And I know this is a thing in the blog post that I mentioned here, but even when I look back at myself, the way I would internalize this is, I was such an idiot. Like, why would I do this? That's really not the way to look at this. It's look at how much I've learned. I've said this before. Language is powerful. The way you think, the words you use, how you communicate to other people, I think can have an impact on things. And so this thought of why would I do this? I was such an idiot is pretty much the same as look at how much I've learned. But one is positive and one is negative, and one will make you feel bad. I'd be interesting to look back at remote working today in 40 years' time and see how inefficient we were. So we have some major breakthroughs. In general, I think efficiency at working has gone up in probably like every industry that's existed in the last 50 years. And so I think it's almost certain that it will continue to go up for at least some time. Even with programming, I feel like we'll start to get sort of AI helped programming. And so you see a little bit of this. Like you have automatic linting, you have IntelliSense, you have smart refactoring tools. These, while they're not exactly AI, imagine if they were infused with some AI and were like, hey, this is probably a code blob you want to type now. It's like, oh, yeah, that is cool. You just saved me having to look up the syntax and typing that out. And yeah, imagine how much more efficient we'll get. So I don't think we'll look back at remote working necessarily. I think remote working will figure out in the next 2-3 years whether it's around to stay or not, because every company was just kind of forced to do it. And will that stay? Hey TJ, should I go into master's or get experience first? Currently, I'm an international student. I don't know what to do. Should I go back to my home country to get work experience? Ooh, so I don't have firsthand experience with this, but the way I look at this is momentum. So, what's important to you, and would you be able to do that thing in 2 years, like after path A versus path B? So, more specifically, people who get out of school and then want to pursue higher education and go to a job first, I think are probably a little less likely to go back to school once they get that job. It's easy to kind of settle into the rest of your life. And then going back to school might seem a little bit more daunting or harder. Maybe you feel like too long has passed. I'm older than all the students. Maybe you feel like, oh, I now have a spouse and kids. I don't have the time for this. Whatever could happen, right? Maybe you buy a house and it's just harder to move back to your home country. So, is it important to you to have more education? Is it important for you to be able to extract the most out of that education? In which case, maybe the work experience is helpful. Could you do both at once? These are things that I think you've got to consider, and also kind of where you like living. There are a lot of factors in this equation. Well, thanks, Andreas. I certainly don't see this as like saint-like. I think what I'm doing, I don't want to discredit myself. I think it's nice. I think this is like a valuable thing. If you guys find it valuable, and I think you guys should also spread this in your own careers as you can. If you're a junior developer now, just think 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and you've got knowledge to share, share that knowledge. And I've certainly benefited from a lot of other people's incredible, just kind attitudes and willingness to help. So I strongly believe in paying it forward. Yeah, a longer time comparison, yeah. Me, but yesterday, yeah. Me, but 5 years ago, me, but 10 years ago, me before I even started learning programming, any of those sorts of things, for sure. Do you want to stay in academia after? Doesn't matter that much then? Not seeing jobs that require a master's degree? Yeah, I think this is where the difference to me between a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, this is me boiling this down maybe a bit too much, is that most people for a bachelor's degree aren't totally sure they're there for the education. But most people for a master's degree are probably like, okay, I know I want this education now. And you'll treat it a little bit more seriously. This is a very broad generalization. But yeah, I think that when I was doing my degree, I was at first interested in learning, and then I was like, I'm kind of sick of this. I want to be doing now. And had I pursued higher education, more than that, I mean, I would have probably been burned out on it. So I think going into the mindful, like, I'm going to learn attitude is really worthwhile. Hey, Barnard Cart. What's the best programming language to start with for UI-based games? I started learning HTML, but seems useful for mostly blogs. TLT, I suggest this blog post. This kind of topic comes up from time to time of just, hey, what's the best language to learn? And I think I've got it written right on here somewhere. Yeah, like which programming language should I learn first? And you asked it more specifically of what should I learn for UI-based games? I suggest reading that blog post, and then what I suggest doing is looking into game engines. And there are lots of them out there. You don't necessarily need to look at one of the big ones like Unreal or Unity. You could look at something like Godot. You could just type in like 2D game engine into Google and find something. There are all sorts of ones. There are web technology based ones. There are heavyweight ones. You can find all sorts of stuff. So the blog post is, I would say 100% for sure, your best like starting point. And I would suggest reading through almost all of this, given what I've inferred from you, inferred about you from your question. And then after that, I would start to think of like, okay, how do I pursue this? And just take it in small chunks. Yeah, finishing even small things. Yep. This guy can. Planning to release your Adam Learns courses for free. I've thought about this. That I am still uncertain about. For one, I would feel bad if I make it free right after people had purchased it and then they're like, I didn't want to give him money. Two is that I'm not sure if I'll get back to Adam Learns, and I kind of want to see what happens when I put in minimal effort. So I've shared with you guys my earnings from the site. It's not been a lot. I think in total I've made like $2,500. And the amount of time I was spending doing this for full-time work was maybe like 2 months. So it's not good money. I'm not trying to say it's good money. And my revenue as of late, can I show this? Let me see if there's anything personal on the screen. I don't think so. No, I'll show you guys this. Yeah. So revenue has been very low. This is for the last month, I guess. And yeah, revenue is like $27. So that's 2 sales, I think. And I think they were both on the same day. And I think it coincided, yep, January 16th, it coincided with me streaming. So basically what I'm trying to say here is like, I'm not really advertising this site. I'm not putting money into it. Sure, it probably shows up in some Google searches or something. But in general, it's like the stream makes people a little bit more aware of it. And then maybe I'll make a sale or two. Like I'm not trying to make a bunch of money off of this, but I do still want to see where it goes. So I have thought about it, but I don't really have any conclusion yet. When's the new Keep coming? Q1 or Q2 is all they're saying right now. I got for those who wanted to know, I got the GMMK Pro. And I got, check this out, I got a switch tester. It can be an ASMR stream now. The note-taking method? Help you break it down in a... No, I have not heard of this. I'll have to look into that. Be awesome if when you add a link to your notes, it automatically calls Web Archive to create a copy of that page. You know what I tend to do when I think that maybe a site will go offline is I'll copy in the content of that site sometimes. So let's say it was a recipe site, right? Normally I just be like banana bread link. But if I do think it's like, well, this is probably, it's just some personal blog post, I'll actually list out all the ingredients here. But yeah, I think having a copy that's just automatically saved would be pretty cool. Hey, Wanda. to stop after you find the thing. Oh man, yeah. And excuse me. And for cleaning especially, it's amazing. And that's where the tip came from originally. Like I said, you look in some place for something, it's natural that it should go there. And actually, even when my wife is trying to find something and she's like, hey, do you know where I put my glasses or something like that? We're about to go out and it's a sunny day. I'll be like, wherever you just looked, let's make sure they go back there afterward. Hey, Divya here. Currently in third year of CS. Biggest struggle is I'm kind of lost on what to do most of the time. Besides studying, my only personal project that I maintain is a Discord bot and some other things that I did because of curiosity. What should I try to study in my free time? Talking about my professional life in the future. English is not my native language. No, it's just very clear. So, yeah, I no need to apologize for the English. I think being lost about what to do, it sounds like the issue stems from wanting to be sort of on track for things. And more specifically, it's about what job might you end up getting. So what I suggest is look at job postings and see what technologies and requirements they list. And all that will do is give you a more concrete goal to steer yourself toward. So let's just say they said something like 2 years of Java and I don't know, whatever, like framework A, framework B, and good communication skills or something. So you could probably say something like, okay, yeah, I've got that. Oh, framework A, I've never heard of that one before. And you just like add this to a list. And if you see this enough times, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of like, you know, frameworks here, maybe like language B and language C and some other technology. And this will give you something maybe you can go pursue. And then you come up with a project idea that just samples from some of this stuff. So you're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take C# and I'm going to use the whatever framework, I don't know. And just come up with a project like that that helps you out. And that way you know you're steering towards something. But in general, I don't know everything about your scenario. I think you shouldn't feel maybe too much pressure because you are still in school and you have a lot of resources and you can talk to other people and figure out what they suggest. But yeah, this is, I think, a way to give you some direction here. And in general, what I look for out of a project, if you're looking for a job, is something sort of like portfolio showable. So maybe something a little bit more visual, or even just something with pictures or videos that you could take. Something that's typically open source would probably be helpful. Those are some good properties there. Seems indicative of picking all the low-hanging fruit when becoming good, and now becoming great is harder than expected. Yeah, that's one way to look at it for sure. Yeah. Used to be these things were gaps for no reason. Yeah, exactly. When you start, like, it's day one of your programming journey, then technically everything is a gap, right? And it's just because you literally, you did not spend any time before it. So how could you know to solve any of these problems or know what these concepts are? Then yes, as you go, you're going to learn the things that are enticing to you or that are taught to you, and you'll sort of have taken all those things. And then, yeah, you get to a point where now you're at year 5 and you're like, now the things that are gaps because I just never pursued them. Yeah, I haven't done any blockchain developing. I've been asked this occasionally, and I don't really have many thoughts on this. IRL bodybuilding. Hey, Daxy. No, oh God, you know what really, I should be careful about what I say here. Athene, the greatest paladin, does this ring a bell to anybody? I don't know, but back in, God, what was it, 2005 or something? Athene was getting some popularity, and I thought, oh man, this is cool. I think since 2005, Athene has gone down a very different path. And I've highlighted a message on my screen, and there's a parallel that can maybe be drawn. I don't know for sure. But I always think when someone gets influenced that it can warp them a bit. I hope I haven't been warped. Do I iron my shirts myself? Yeah, I do. And I don't know if you can tell, I don't iron this part because I always roll up my sleeves and I always think, it probably just looks like being bunched up normally, right? So yeah, I try to save time. I always wonder if I go into work, finally, you guys can't see my back ever, right? So like, I don't have to iron the back of it, but that's the easiest part of the shirt to iron. Any recommended wireless headphones with okay microphones? I can't comment on this. But yeah, thanks Cam for chiming in. For Chom, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. It's always difficult. Any recommendation for good Haskell exercises or tutoring? I don't have any for that. I've tried learning Haskell a couple of times in the past, just sort of briefly. And I think I always just type in like Haskell tutorial or something. And I think Yeah, I think their official ones that they have are probably a pretty good way to get started. But I can't comment on whether they've been effective because I haven't given them much of a shot. Masters or no? Have you heard of post-grad depression? I feel like it's more common. I haven't heard of post-grad depression. I did not get a master's degree though. I got a bachelor's degree that was supposed to take 5 years, and that I ended up taking 4 years for it. And that if I'd wanted to, it would have been one extra year to do a master's. And even that, I thought, I don't want to spend another year doing this. I remember distinctly, and there are certain feelings I wanted to capture in my life so that I would never question them again. And I captured this feeling of like, it was year 4, and I thought, I'm done with this. I had gotten used to this whole pattern of like, I'm going to class, you know, meet a couple of new people maybe, you find out what this is all about, you got to do projects, it's a little bit stressful. And I felt like, I think I've learned enough at this point for me to go start doing stuff. And now I feel like I have the tools to be able to learn what I want to learn, and that it's still important to allocate time for that. So I don't think you're ever done learning in software engineering, but that balance of learning versus doing will start to shift more as you get to a job toward doing. Yeah. Company is calling us back after working from home, but I'm much more productive from home. Guess I need to look for a remote job. Yeah, I think if they're calling you back full time, that it can be problematic. Have you talked to your manager about, could I still work from home 3 days out of the week? Because that might not be so bad. You know, it's kind of, you can maybe get the best of both worlds. If not, yeah, getting a remote job might be the best bet. Only doing a master's to get a job in the U.S. Otherwise, I was thinking of going back to India and getting a job. Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of Indian people end up doing this. So the whole master's degree to get a job in the U.S. Yes, I think that is probably a good idea because I think that's a much more standard route. So yeah, yeah, that definitely adds to the equation, and I think you will have more easily findable opportunities that way. I'm married to an Indian woman who immigrated here from India and who went through that route, and so I'm speaking somewhat from like, we've had experience with this sort of thing, but also we have lots of friends around here, and also there are a lot of Indian people in Seattle, so I have seen that route work out better, I think, in general, than I've seen the other route of go get work experience first. So something to consider. I can't speak for everybody, and you should definitely talk to other people who've made that shift already, who've gone from India to the U.S. Joined our company while they were working from home. After trying that, work from the office, up for the office. Yeah, actually, that's another thing, Ghost. Definitely don't give up too soon. Yeah. You know, we have people on our team who already went to the office, yeah. Do you have Adam Learns Retro? What's an easy way to check existence of these kinds of things? Oh, hey, I made it to the bottom of the chat finally. Neat. I don't know what you mean by Adam Learns Retro, though. Like a retrospective of what did I feel about this stuff? Because I don't have that. And an easy way to check the existence is typically like a command, but for this, just feel free to ask. Yeah. Oh, is it one of the Marie Kondo methods? I hadn't heard of that from her. Definitely try to search what I need to learn to get a job. Also try to maintain a list of things to learn. Yeah, and do take it a step at a time. Try to talk to other people who've gotten jobs and see what helped for them. They'll probably have advice that's more specific to you. So someone who just graduated a year ago and found a job, talking to them as opposed to talking to me, you'll get something more specific to your country, the opportunities around you, maybe where you want to go. Hey, Rednecks, you heard of it. Hey, Robert, I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. I've been happy to do these group mentoring streams. I think they've been very interesting. Hey, Unknown, and hey, Hamida. You're back, or at least I just realized. Yeah, I'm streaming every other Saturday, and it's just for like 2 to 3 hours on those days, and it's been just kind of group mentoring for that time. So it's a very limited capacity. I often struggle trying to reproduce bugs and finding what code I need to change to implement a feature or bug fix. Any advice? Struggle trying to reproduce bugs, finding what code I need to implement a feature or bug fix. Okay, let me think about this for a second. So, in my mind, reproducing a bug is typically along this route of someone sees a bug and files it. And so it comes down to who is this someone. If they're a software engineer, then they should be including the steps, the expected outcome, and the actual outcome. If they are a regular person, then they'll just do whatever. And this literally just means whatever at this point. They'll just say I found a bug, or they'll include a screenshot, or they'll just tell you a funny story about when they were a kid and fell off their bike. Like you just get any number of things. In the case that it's the first one and you're not getting the steps and the expected outcome and actual outcome, ask them to file those things, or talk to the person who filed the bug and ask for more information. You should 100% do that. In the case that they're a regular person, it all depends on what the triage process is for your company. You might reach out to the customer. You might only kind of like look at bugs in aggregate. So like, are a lot of people hitting this? You might add more logging or metrics to your code so that you can find these things more easily. Maybe it auto files a screenshot, for example. But in my mind, reproducing a bug is always just, you just follow steps. So if the steps aren't there, then it's find a way to get those steps basically. And it shouldn't be, oh, hey, I run into an error when I go to this screen. It's like, maybe that's not enough input. Maybe, yeah, you've got to like look through the code and try to reverse engineer how it can happen. That's generally not very productive. And so typically that's when you'd add in some more instrumentation to find this. And then finding what code you need to implement a feature or bug fix. So this is what I would think of as more just generalist software engineering, of how do you go from problem statement to solving that problem. And yes, it's definitely a certain set of steps. So the way I would think about this at first is like design what you think might work and sort of test the design, not even the code yet. Like, will it work? Will you run into any problems down the road? Is there any tech that you'll incur by this? And then talk to other people about it and see what they might think. And if you're early on and you're learning, I think they'd be happy to help you with this stuff. And then of course you can just kind of try it out. Maybe you can prototype what's the fastest way to fix this thing, or what's the fastest way to implement something. Prototyping generally is like, write the fastest code possible. And when I say fast, I mean the fastest to write it, not the fastest to run it. And then throw it all out and write the correct way. So yeah, I think some combination of those sorts of techniques. Yeah, I think my phrasing was probably a little weird there. I was trying to debate on what level of detail I wanted to share. Retros and retrospective. Yeah, so retrospective on Adam Learns, I have my own kind of internal retrospective on this, and the way I look at it is we had incredibly aggressive goals, and there was lots of pressure from those goals, and it led to not enough time to prove the value of the site. I think that the site was kind of valuable. I have some more thoughts about this too, but I don't think they're too helpful. Yeah, Hamada, you can definitely link it. Biggest stumbling block for new developers is lack of Git experience. Interesting. Huh. Because the way I always look at this is like, it's probably easy enough to make a Git cheat sheet that is specifically like scenario focused at what they encounter on the job. So that you say something like, I'm getting a merge issue, and that just links to like, download this 3-way merge program, like run this command, I don't know, something like that. I don't know what the context is for this Guzmop, so perhaps I'm just saying this for no reason. Now you can say just do a line. Yeah. This is very domain specific. Yeah. Can you give some tips on how to write fast, efficient code? Just got a job that will involve writing ETL-ish solutions, loads of data to be processed fast, yep, and microservice architecture, and this is totally new to me. Okay, so fast, efficient code, despite you listing it as like, how can I help you with this, I would say is goal number 2. I think goal number 1 is comfort and knowledge. I think you said this is totally new to you, and what you're doing is sort of a well-defined problem space of this like extract, transform, load, but it's new to you. And so if you have coworkers who are there who can help you with this, like glom onto them as much as you can and say, hey, can you lead me through this? Can you explain these topics? Once you feel like you've got a lay of the land, that's where I think you can start worrying about the fast and efficient code. And probably part of gaining this knowledge will actually steer you toward your goal number 1, my goal number 2 for you. So yeah, I think you'll see enough examples of it and you'll be able to steer more toward it yourself. Hey, Urban Commando. I hope you have a good weekend too. Nice to see you drop by. Don't write bugs. Yeah. What's your long-term approach to working for a company versus having your own business? Currently leaning toward the latter as much as possible, since that's where my passion is at the moment, and the former seems like a secure option. Love to hear your approach, especially based on what we've seen. Yeah, so this is kind of new for me. The last 5 years, you guys, of course, saw that it was just my business, no traditional job. And now it's like my traditional job, no real side business. But my goal, I talked about this on stream before, and I don't see this as being all that private. I split it into something like this. For like 2 years, it's going to be get good at my job, hopefully get promoted. Then the next 3 years, it's going to be focused on like being the best engineer I can be at that level. I don't want to get promoted again after that. I'm going to just like coast is the wrong word. I want to stay at that level. I want to do good work, and I want to just absorb everything I can possibly absorb. And then at any given point in any of this time, it's reevaluate. It's not like I'm gonna, oh, it's year number 4. I got to be at this point. I can't possibly drift away from that. So, but my goal is at like kind of the 5-year mark is have a good idea for what I'm shifting to. And I suspect that's going to be some like new business idea for myself. It might not be. It might be that I go back to an old business idea. Maybe I renew Adam Learns and I try new things. But what I also suspect is that within the latter half of this, I'm doing both things at once. So the coast that I mentioned is probably that first year I'm getting comfortable at the new level. And then for the next couple of years, I'm like tackling that job while also sort of tackling another job and testing it out. A lot of this has to do with how comfortable you are around risk. If you like a lot of risk, you'll just jump right into your own business and you'll kind of trust where you'll land. And if you don't like a lot of risk, you'll want to prove it first and then be able to jump to a safe landing spot. Find reading TypeScript source code really hard when it's this abstracted. Mostly just a voice constructor that makes 0 sense. Okay, let's take a look. So this is quite the inheritance hierarchy we have here. And let's look at the voice constructor itself. So I, to be honest, have looked at TypeScript for maybe a week. And and I've used JavaScript for quite a while. But yeah, so knowing what JavaScript code this turns into and would look like, I think could actually be a good way to help and see someone who uses this sort of thing. Is this for a known code base? Can you look at any implementers of this interface? Because I think that would be a good way to look at this. You are looking at something abstract right now. It's a type definition of an interface. So there are sort of 2 parts that this is abstract. Like there's the type, but then there's also an interface itself is not concrete. And that's where I say look at implementers and see if that helps you at all. Unfortunately, I can't provide much more insight into this specific example here. And I find that whenever there's anything crazy like that, it's like, is this paradigmatic of TypeScript, let's say? And if it is, turns out that yes, then you'd have to go back and learn the fundamentals. If it's not, you'll just end up with these like zany things that somebody writes every once in a while in almost any language where they think, oh, I could do this really quickly. Actually, there was one of those in the Golang video. There's some language I never heard of, and you can write Conway's Game of Life in like 10 characters, which is absurd to me. Does anyone understand that code? I don't know. It's like the quick sort in Python that takes place on 1 line of code. It's like you've got to understand a pretty good amount of... Oh god, let me get this. I don't know what's about to show up. Oh, this is the worst. Okay, never mind. I'm not going to show this. Yeah, anyway, breaking it down into something more, into something smaller, or finding something more concrete are the ways I'd approach that. Thinking of building a website from scratch that requires user accounts and interactivity. I have a bachelor's in CS but no experience. Any tips on what technologies to use? So something that requires user accounts, if this is just for a personal project, I'd say go for it. If it's for anything that's going to be in production, so let's say like real users, maybe even money is involved, I would say go for it by using someone's library for auth. Authentication is something that is traditionally very difficult to get correct, and it's a problem that's been solved many times by many people. So you said building a website. I think you have to consider all the parts of a website. So front end and back end. Front end, you're going to be looking typically at either just like vanilla JavaScript? How much do you want to just learn versus a framework? Popular frameworks nowadays include React, Angular. You could also do the whole website in something that's not a JavaScript focused stack. So you could look at a web framework like Django or Ruby on Rails or any other number of things. I don't know how up to date some of this is. I would do research on this stuff if I were about to go into it. And then for the back end, you have user accounts, so you do need a back end here. You're going to need to consider how this looks for you and how simple or how complex you want it to be. Do you want to use a cloud platform and all the sort of built-in functionality that they have? So, for example, I've used Firebase before. It covers auth, it covers a database for you, and it covers what they call cloud functions for Firebase, which is a way to run arbitrary code. You could look into AWS. You could look into just a VM that you get on something like DigitalOcean, and you just run your own web server. And maybe it's like a Node.js and Express combination that you have. So as far as what technologies to use, I think what you're going to want to do here is identify your goal. Is it to have the product, or is it to have knowledge in this stuff? And if it's to have knowledge in this stuff, then just find out what you want the knowledge in, really, because there are lots of ways to make a website. Not sure if you remember my question last time. You've done a group stream like this, but I was the guy who was struggling to get into interviews for several months. Just recently, I'm on my second interview. Never give up. Nice naked flame. Yeah, I think I do remember. You were saying you were getting dejected, right? How long had it been taking? I think what's toughest about that is if you go long enough without any successes, you start to get into a spiral of negativity and think the successes won't happen. So I'm glad to hear. Got a second interview. And yeah, don't forget that. Whether it goes on to another job or not, whether it goes on to the job and you don't end up wanting it, like, you got this far, you can do it again, learn what's worked. Nice, Proxy King. And hey, Leander. Yeah, slightly more frequently. Once every 2 weeks. Not a lot of time. How can you measure being the best engineer I can be at that level? SMART criteria and all. So for me, this is, like I said, this is like a 5-year plan. And what I was talking about is the 3-year point. And that was assuming that I got promoted. So a lot of this is pretty vague. The best engineer that I can be is likely going to be steered by whatever my next like couple of remaining years would be. So let's say I decided I wanted to go into Adam Learns, then what I'd probably want to do is start covering a lot of breadth. That would probably be the way I could be the best engineer. Let's say I wanted to go into a game project and I wanted to hire some employees, then maybe I want to steer myself more toward a little bit of management, and so on and so forth. There'd be like a large flow chart here. Excuse me. What level will I be promoted to? The next level. I don't think I've been. Did I share my level last time? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, just one more level. That's all I'm looking for right now. Hey, Captain of the Dorks. I know this is a really non-committal answer. Is it possible to use Golang on hardware, something like Arduino? I don't actually know enough about the architecture of Arduino to know this. What have I used on Arduino? I think I used Python. But I guess they're all just interfaces to whatever's running on the microcontroller. Like, I doubt Python's running on the microcontroller. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. But I would start by just doing a search of like Golang on Arduino and finding out, is it a thing, is it not a thing? If it's not a thing, I can tell you what probably is a thing, is Golang on Raspberry Pi. So this is almost certainly a possibility, because I'm pretty sure you can run on ARM. And a Raspberry Pi isn't like too much more expensive than an Arduino. Anyway, it's a different route than what you mentioned for sure. So, but I would start with a search. Hey, Chippy. Did you get to those NES games yet? Coding knowledge is non-existent. How did you expand your knowledge, and where's a good scholastic place to start? How did I expand my knowledge? So what I always link people to is this blog post, which you might have seen, Captain the Dorks. When you say scholastic specifically, there are some free resources from, I think, Harvard and MIT, and I've used some of both of them, and I found them to be pretty good. But as far as I know, for computer science, like 101, this is going to be basically like a real computer science class that they just happen to make free. What that means is that you get lecture content, you get notes, and you get exercises. And just like in a sort of real school environment, you need to consume all of these. So if you were to just go through the lectures, you will not get really anything out of it. If you just go through the notes, you won't get anything out of it. If you go through the exercises, you probably get the most out of it without going through the others. But like you combine all of them, and you have to be pretty studious about that. So if that sounds good, then I would say yeah, you could look those up. I remember when I was learning relatively recently about dynamic programming some more, I actually put a link to all of the different lectures I went through. I think yeah, they're all on YouTube. Yeah. So you can probably search for some of these things. And then they linked to this, the Intro to Algorithms course. Yeah, so MIT OpenCourseWare. That's what I would suggest. And where do they have Course Home? So do they have... Well, anyway, yeah, you could probably find it through here. I guess I thought it'd be easier to search through. But it's on here somewhere. You can probably find a CS course. And that's assuming you want to definitely go through a school. If you want to just go through kind of regular resources, there's lots of stuff out there. And lots of people to help out too. I have a thought process on whether or not coding outside of work is healthy. I think it's healthy if you have, if everything else is in balance. What gets to be unhealthy is one of a couple common scenarios. So one is doing less at work so that you have energy to do your personal project. And the other is giving something's got to give. The thing that gives is something that shouldn't have given. So this is where that balance comes in that I was talking about. Like, let's say your normal work week is you work full time, you exercise a few times a week, you do some like meal prep, I don't know, like a bunch of stuff. And what you decide, you know what, I'm going to cut out exercise. Like, that's probably not a healthy way to pursue both things at once. So generally, I think the healthiest way to go about this is either to get to a point with your work where you can handle it and people are happy with the work that you're doing, and then you can also tackle another project. So generally getting more proficient or taking on less responsibility if that's possible. Maybe you were trying to get promoted and now you're not. And I forgot the beginning of my sentence to know the rest of my train of thought here, but the other thing you can do is scope down your personal project or just tackle it for a little bit less time per week. So in general, it's not a fast, like, yes, this is unhealthy, and it's also not a fast, like, no, this is totally fine to do. Oh, yeah. Thank you. You collab. Yeah. You think streaming programming learning on Twitch helps? Like, feeling that people watching keeps you focused? Do you think it's worth trying? I loved this, but I loved this for a couple of other reasons. For one, I wasn't just like learning programming at that point. I was learning specific frameworks and kind of like trying to pursue a goal. And perhaps more importantly is there was an audience. So there were people who could help me with this. If there wasn't an audience, I don't think it would have helped. But I don't think you need a large audience. I just think you need an audience. So if you have like 1 to 2 people chatting and at least one of those people can help, then awesome. But I have seen people stream on Twitch and they'll just like go check social media while they're streaming. At that point, it's not helping you learn how to code. I'm not saying those streamers shouldn't be doing that. I'm just saying if your goal is to learn, that's clearly not a good motivational framework for you. So I think it helped me a ton. I think I wrote pretty extensively about all this stuff. Somewhere. It was one of my blog posts. Blog dev. No, wait, is it? Yeah. Yeah, I talk about a lot of this in this blog post. Circuit Python, I see. Gotcha. Yeah, I'll be NES games are still just as hard. Yeah, I have mixed feelings now on retro gaming. I think at some point I always looked very fondly back on the past, generation or two. But now we're talking about Super Nintendo as, I'm not going to actually try to think of this, let's say like 6 generations back. And yeah, sure, there were some good games. There's still some games that I think stand up to the test of time, but I think they're much fewer and farther between than when we were in, say, the N64 era. So yeah, NES games, now there are very few, I think, that stand up to the test of time. And that, I will pontificate on this for just a tiny bit longer. Media has a lifespan. This is a theory that I have, and that there's no way around it. Like, take the best movie in the world. There's going to be enough changes to culture or society or movies themselves or the medium through which you watch them such that 200 years from now, people might not even be able to relate to it anymore. And I think games have just changed so much since the 80s. when NES games came out. There's never a case where everything else is in balance. I don't mean perfect balance. I don't mean like that Thanos whatever knife meme or something. I'm talking about just that you feel like nothing's really majorly slipping. So things like relationships, things like your physical health, your mental health. These are things that if they're slipping, that means that you've got the wrong balance. I don't mean that you're like, yes, you're hitting air exercise like 4 times per week or something. It's not meant to be too prescriptive. To consider getting a Switch Pro. If there's ever official news on a Switch Pro, I'll start looking into considering it. But I really don't like gaming rumors. So I've read all these rumors. Well, I haven't read them. I've seen article titles of rumors, and I always like hide those posts. I want to know facts. What are the perks that you get working with your current companies that you would like to see in future gigs? I don't look at perks so much, I guess, as what is important for job satisfaction. And what I think is important for job satisfaction for me is almost entirely to do with the people and I guess somewhat to do with the opportunity. So the people boils down to manager and immediate teammates. And I gotta say, I think my current teammates are really, really good. I think they're all smart people, they're helpful, they're open to my stupid questions. I'm saying this kind of jokingly. They're open to my questions. I think that's really good. And like that's as much as you could want from a team, They seem to be doing their own work pretty well. So, yeah. And that's where I think is the most important. So let's say there was a perk where whatever, they pay for your commute or something. Like if these things are set, that's what matters the most to me. The perks are perks. It's okay to keep not doing exercise. Yeah, if you have no physical health or relationships to begin with, then keep on trucking. Hey, Instagram. Yeah. Are you... I might... I don't know what this means. Anyway, it's sort of a flyby. Like, it's a once every other Saturday thing. So, 2 streams per month is what I'm doing now. So, I don't know if that's a flyby for you or not, but yeah, it's not too much. Yeah, it doesn't highlight anything with punctuation after. Even, I think, Adam, comma doesn't get highlighted. What's the most hype technology or framework at Google right now? Google has a lot of in-house stuff, so I don't know the answer to this. And it probably varies from org to org. But yeah, Google has just tons of stuff. I mean, if you think about it, like a lot of the tools that Google has, you've seen an external version of them. So I'll give you an example. I'm pretty sure. Here it is. Did they mention? Yeah. They say this right on the page, so I'm not leaking any information. When you build software using Bazel, you're using the same code that's been refined and tested for years at Google to build heavy-duty, mission-critical infrastructure services and applications. So, like, this is a build tool, but Google has their own version internally. So, like, they're not gonna use the open source version because they've got their own version. So, yeah, you'll find that a decent chunk. Just found you, and I think I want to try to learn typing so fast. Let me see. Thanks, Trey. I think learning how to type is important. Generally, the way I look at this is the time it takes from thinking about how to do something to doing that thing should be as small as possible. And the reason why is because it's less time to context switch. And I don't think typing is even the most important thing. Typing is important for like emails, notes, but people think, oh, fast typing speed should be better for programming, right? I think you run the same risk of context switching mid-line if you're taking too long to write it, but the typing speed is not the biggest force toward helping that. I think it's more about knowing the syntax, using the tools available to you, IntelliSense, anything else. You think you'd enjoy work more if you're back in the office? I think a hybrid model would be best for me. This is the first job I've worked at where I've never really met my coworkers. Like I've talked to them. And actually, that's not entirely true. I did go running with one of my coworkers a couple weeks back. So I met him in real life. But that was it. Like, if we hadn't gone running together, that would have just been, I wouldn't meet this person for another, 4 months, 6 months, however long it's going to be. So yeah, I think a hybrid model would be great because the commute, just short story, is not probably going to be fun. But I value a lot of the working from home environment. I have a really good setup here. I have no commute, of course. Nobody has a commute when they're working from home. And yeah, you can kind of intermix other tasks throughout the day. Oh, full time. Oh, yeah, my bad. That's probably true. I kept treating it as featuring, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense. How many hours a day are you sitting versus standing? I remember you had an adjustable desk. Yeah, I try to stand twice per day. That doesn't always happen. So when I do stand, I try to stand for at least like an hour. Just getting up a bit and moving around, I think, is good. My current job, I have very good teammates, but I do not enjoy the stack we have. I feel like I'm missing out and screwing my future self by not getting real world experience on all these new frameworks. I'm scared of switching jobs because it'll make me miss my current job. This sounds like FOMO, which is fear of missing out. I don't think there's a more substantiated fear from what I've seen from this, which is like new frameworks will come and go. You can learn them if you want to. You can do them as a personal project if you want to. Let's say you missed all of them and then it came time to find a job, you learn them then. And having that sort of like just-in-time learning model is kind of interesting because it lets you realize that you're not really missing out as much as you might think you are. But one thing that you said for sure you would miss is your current job. You value your teammates. That's something that would be a gamble. So now let's say you had the opposite. You were working at a job where you felt like, I am working on all of the hot new technology. In fact, we don't even write code. All we do is we just learn technology A, technology B, technology C, and just keep going. And you're like, that's perfect. I am on top of things. But I hate my teammates. Like, would that be a better situation? So the way I see it is you're in a good situation right now. You have something that is rare, which is you like your team. Awesome. This other stuff that you feel are gaps, like maybe you can present it in your personal time. Maybe you can say, hey, I want to work on a prototype for work that uses technology that I'd like to learn. And yeah, maybe that gets accepted, maybe not. But I'd say the situation you're in is probably better than the opposite situation. How many years of experience do I have in software dev? So I have to be a little bit careful about this because I have not shared my age on stream other than through this. This is the way you can find out how old I am, and it's a silly scavenger hunt. So let's just say I have between 10 and 20 years of experience. Hey, Captain Planet. Good to see you. Do you think your coworkers tuned into the stream? No, I don't. What percent of your time is coding at work? I I don't think it's wise for me to share this right now. So I'm sorry, but I shouldn't answer that. Get this feeling of missing out. Yeah, I don't know if you ever heard the term FOMO before, but you should definitely look into that because a lot of people get this specifically with social media where let's say you go on Facebook or Instagram, you're seeing all of typically the best of people's lives. So you're seeing travel, you're seeing like good food, you're seeing cool moments. Whatever they're doing that is good is what they're going to broadcast on social media. Again, typically it's not like people don't share bad stuff too. And so then you start thinking like, wait, I'm not traveling. I'm not eating like plates and plates of sushi every day. Why can't I do that? And then you start to get down about this. And so I doubt this is inflicted by social media necessarily, but probably you're reading all these news articles about like, oh man, this technology is picking up. So cool. Like people are sharing their stories about it. And so I think some part of that can be like, cut out that source a little bit. So if it was social media and you were like, I'm not traveling as much as I should be, then you can cut out some of those social media posts. You can follow different people. You could, I don't know, maybe block content depending on the site. And you can kind of do the same thing even when it comes to new frameworks. Just, put your head in the sand a little bit more so that you don't have that fear. Oh, meetings or things. Meetings are pretty heavy on like one day of the week. So that it probably works out to the actual time I get to do work is about 80% of the time. Maybe 20% is meetings. Yeah. I know that's not your entire question, but that's the part I'm comfortable to answer. Return on investment is totally worth it for me. Yeah, what I tend to say, I mentioned about context switching earlier, but the way I say this is keyboards are here to stay. If you're working in software engineering, it's very unlikely that sometime in the next 10 years you're going to replace the keyboard. If you're on your phone, you're probably doing voice queries for things like, hey, set a reminder for 2 months from now to I don't know, whatever. But yeah, on your computer, you're going to be using a keyboard. So if you improve your words per minute by 5, for some people, that's going to be like a 15% improvement. That's like 15% improvement across 10 years. Think of how many more words you'll type in that time. That's like days of savings. Potentially a lot of context switching too that you'll save. It could impart more benefits than you might think. Would rather like my colleagues and work on a good stack. Yeah. Because the way I see it is you can get the good stack out of your own projects or potentially out of side projects, even at work, but you can't fix your colleagues. You can only kind of mitigate their impact on you. How do you convince a defensive teammate that it's a safe space? I think my most general answer I can give here that's still helpful is lead by example. Like, whoa. Like, don't ever raise your voice. I mean, this is pretty obvious. Don't raise your voice. Like, don't kind of nitpick. What's that expression? Diplomacy is the art of giving people ladders to climb down. I mean, this is really important whenever you notice anyone's defensive. You say things in a certain way that lets them like back off from their defensiveness without feeling like they were forced into backing off. So yeah, I think leading by example is helpful for that, and kind of just guiding them along to being less defensive. Short of that, it's talking to other people on the team, maybe figuring out what's worked for them, if this is actually a problem, talking to a manager or something. Let's say we think about ML and neural net stuff is hyped right now. What do you think could come next? I think if we're talking about this, I think that this can impact almost every single field out there. And even when it comes to software engineering, I think you'll start to see more and more of this. So I mentioned IntelliSense. I think you will eventually get to the point with coding where you start to type a block of code, and just like how you type a Google search and you're like, where do, and then what comes after that is like, where does water go when it evaporates or something? You know, like that's a whole thought that you didn't need to type out. Imagine that happened with blocks of code. And actually, this is happening a lot. I've been using Google Docs a lot more. This happens a lot there, where you type out something like as soon as you've typed out this much, and it fills in with as soon as possible. And you're like, cool, I'll just hit tab, and I just save myself however many characters this is. 11. So I think that's going to impact everything when it comes to testing tools, like scheduling things, finding bugs in code. Any number of different areas will probably be impacted by this. How much DME did you buy? I didn't get in on that. Not asking for your typing speed. What would be the remainder if you were divided by 1,000? I solved this riddle. I know your age. Just want to check if I can catch you. Might not ask. I see. I think the best way to combat FOMO in tech is to try them. Give yourself like 3 to 6 hours a week to try that specific tech. I think that's good for the FOMO caused by not knowing a framework, for sure. I think that's a really good strategy. I think if your FOMO is more on the job scale of why can't I be working in those technologies? Why can't that be my job? I think that's something where you need to start to like hide yourself from these posts where people are like, I'm working in this technology, I love it, and you guys should all work in it too. And it's like, if that's getting you down, don't look at that thing anymore. There's this meme on Reddit that just showed up. It's just a really simple 4-panel comic. It's a guy with a bruise. He pokes his bruise. He goes, ow. He waits. He pokes his bruise again and goes, ow. It's like, that's what we do sometimes when it comes to FOMO. There's this stigma. We're like, but I can't escape that stigma. I just got to poke at this bruise. And the advice is simple. Like, just stop doing that, you know? And more importantly, it comes down to identifying your own behaviors. So I mentioned this on Reddit that I have this strategy now, which is block everybody. If I see that someone's karma is more than 50K, or I see a repost that I'm like, I don't think this is, I don't know, I'll like look through someone's post history and I'll just start blocking people now. And whenever you find someone who's got like 1 million karma and I block them, I always think that is a real treasure to block that person. Because now I'm getting more like organic Reddit feed and not a bunch of advertisements and reposts for karma and stuff. And yeah, I think people should start pruning out whatever they're doing that's giving them any sort of activity. Nice. Got your first SW job out of college. Nice and goals long term, 1 to 5 years. Not sure what to focus on for the first 1 to 6 months. Any thoughts on helpful things to focus on during that time? The way I look at goals is that ideally you have your short-term goals, you have your medium-term goals, and you have your long-term goals. and this is all a straight line with straight arrows. That is not how things work in reality. You have a sort of, I'm going to use the cloud shape here, even though it's like a bubble. You have like the long-term goals are over here. And from here, if you tried shooting out toward the long-term goal, you might miss by like a wide margin. You might hit somewhere within this cloud, but it's really hard to know. And so then you form a sort of smaller cloud here of what are your medium-term goals, and an even smaller cloud of short-term goals. Short-term goals shouldn't have much ambiguity around them. And so you kind of try to like shoot through these things to get a sort of accurate representation. But at any point, this is all happening on a smaller scale within this, so that your medium-term goals are actually a set of small, medium, and long-term. So have flexibility within them is what I'm trying to say. And don't worry too much about, excuse me, sorry, I'm coughing a lot. Don't worry too much about, is the next 1 month being spent most valuably for the next 5 years? Like, you'll get more insight into what's going to help you as you go. And just having those goals and reevaluating them from time to time is good. So what I might suggest is, like, on the first of every month, evaluate your goals. And just ask yourself some basic questions. Are you on track? What could change? How, like, where is there haziness maybe? Any number of questions. I'm not trying to list all of these out for sure, but I think that'll help you out quite a lot. Stream your thoughts directly into code editors. It's just like the word cat a million times. Oh, that's not my quote. I don't remember who said that. I think it was Churchill or someone. Wait a minute, random thoughts. Yeah. It's got my first job. Nice. And I've seen that everyone works on a laptop. Since I don't have one, I got told to just bring a quote of a laptop I want. I'll get it. I don't know how far I can push the price without looking greedy. You should just ask. You should definitely ask, because this is a big purchase and you don't want to go in either direction. You don't want to go in something like where you kind of cover your bases and then it costs $4,000, and you don't want to get something that's very weak but that you know will get approved and it costs like $300 and then you hate that laptop. So you should really just ask, like, what's the range for the budget, and maybe even a more specific question of like, is $1,700 out of budget? Is it? And if they're like, whoa, we're talking like an $800 laptop, it's got to be, then yeah, now you have your answer. But yeah, I would not just ballpark it and then just go buy something. Or ask your coworkers how much it. No, you can actually ask your coworkers what were the specs of yours, and then maybe kind of reverse engineer and figure out how much it would have cost. Hey, Ara. Defensive about their own productivity. They just transferred to our team because they didn't like the last one. We'll all be out here thinking like you're doing fine. We're all just slow right now. Yeah, I think that encouragement is really all you need. Remember, everyone's a person here, and they've got their own kind of self-doubts. And you said they just transferred, right? Whenever anyone says this of just, I think there hasn't been enough time to establish consistency. And one of my life mottos is allow people to be inconsistent for short periods of time. And this is really helpful for lots of realms of life. Like, imagine if a friend doesn't call you for like 2 weeks, but in general, they're pretty responsive and everything. It's like, maybe they're going through something, like cut them some slack. So they just joined the team. They'll probably get better. And in the meantime, you can try to encourage them. You can try to talk to the rest of the team and see if they can help encourage them, see if this is more of a problem. Make sure that doesn't turn into gossip. Make sure it's always like working toward a productive goal. How do you deal with a European team? I feel like I haven't read the rest of this yet, but that European is not going to be salient to this. But let's see. Who thinks they're rock stars? They don't think they need to write documentation. Have a superior complex over teams from other regions. Okay, you kind of saved it with the other reasons, but a team that thinks they're rock stars and they don't need to write documentation, I think this is very tough, because this sounds like a systemic problem that's probably being fed by that team itself. And so I think what you can do is you can, remember, in kind of like non-aggressive ways, ask for help of like, hey, didn't see this in the documentation. Do you mind sharing how to do it or adding it to the docs? And this is like a, hey, I acknowledge that your team has done great with documentation, but I didn't see this part. So is it there? Could you maybe add it? And this is a non-aggressive way of stating it, I think. It's like, there might be a shortcoming, but I'm not saying you caused this. And I also did some legwork to try to get there and find the answer myself. And maybe this helps. And so I think it's kind of finding ways sort of around it a bit, unless you feel like this is really impacting everyone's work, in which case maybe talking to the the managers or something. Hard to address this without reaching out and saying, hey, notice you're being defensive. I think that would be like an aggressive way of stating this, right? So the way I might approach this, if you were to reach out, is like, hey, notice there was some tension when we mentioned blank the other day. Is everything okay? I think you're doing a great job if you're worried about that. I've had my own concerns for my work or something. You kind of like extend an olive branch. And this sounds less aggressive, and it's, I think, a softer way of reaching out. My current job, we started doing support besides development on the products. It started taking almost 30% of the time, started hating it. Are you looking for a way to not have to do that, I guess? Because sometimes these are resourcing issues that are planned to be fixed. So maybe there's a goal to get a support team and they just don't have one yet. I'm not sure if you're looking for that kind of advice, but I would say, like, ask if this is permanent and maybe express that it could be done differently, and really just overall have a conversation about it. This is why Adam never talks to me. This is the European thing. Did you feel overwhelmed when you start the job? Too many things? Yes. Yes. And I don't know if you saw this already, but I just wrote a blog post like 2 days ago, summing up how I felt about this stuff. And it's this, battling imposter syndrome with Super Circuit's great artwork. Yeah. And this sums up all my thoughts on it. And it's really helped me. It really has. Not that I wrote the blog post, because I already had those thoughts in my head. I mean, the thoughts that were in my head really helped, of like, be a little bit more positive, try to look at what I've learned, don't focus so much on what I don't know. Currently in the toxic cycle of learning and then relearning when I learned months down the line after stopping. Any advice on how to learn effectively and healthy to land a job for 6-12 months down the line? Tech field, currently web development. Feel like you're learning and then relearning months down the line. So are you saying the knowledge isn't really sticking? As in, let's just, for example, say you're learning JavaScript and then 6 months down the line, you're like, how do I do this thing in JavaScript again? Because I think when that happens, there is a certain amount of like a frequency or a cadence you need in order to really absorb something. So for example, I went through some of the Rust documentation months ago. And whoops. If you were to ask me now, hey, can you recall anything from Rust? I'd be like, no, I didn't use it. It wasn't at that frequency. So maybe what you need is the consistency of this. And I don't know how you would achieve it necessarily. It could literally just be more time, or it could be less switching. Either of those could help here. Yeah, I think that's what it might take. And however you can help focus toward that, I think would be worthwhile. And that way, when you think about it, it's like your tasks feed themselves almost. Like, let's say you were learning JavaScript and you were having a hard time, and now you're doing some web development. Well, the web development's based in JavaScript, so I'd be like, oh, well, I'll do the back end in Node.js, and that way I'm still learning JavaScript, so I'm using the same language on the front end and the back end. And then I would maybe start to look into, okay, maybe I write like isomorphic code so that the code I'm writing on the server runs on the client as well. There are any number of ways you can do this so that you get this sort of feedback loop instilled. Plug in a block Reddit post from posters with greater. Yeah, I think it'd be kind of interesting to do that. I already use the tech I FOMO at work. The fact is that jobs with that tech pay better as well. Okay, so it's fear of missing out on more than just the tech. Okay, so this is a concern I think a lot of people have, and this is why you see a lot of job transfers. What you could do, here's at least an idea, is you could interview at these jobs and maybe talk to the team. Like, your goal would be to figure out, is this team just as good as my team or better? And then also I'd be working with technologies I like, and also I'd have a better salary. And there's always a risk there, because how much will you actually get to talk to the team? How much time does it take to interview these jobs? This is definitely not a simple process. Yeah. But you got to be careful of the grass is always greener syndrome. I think it's easy to always say, like, I have a realm of circumstances, and there's always going to be one that bubbles up to the top as being the worst. And so you try to like hammer that down, right? Now there's just another one that bubbles up to the top. There's always a worse circumstance. There's always a best circumstance. And I think it's like an anti-pattern to just keep trying to like hammer down all the worst ones because in that process, other ones will rise to the top. And like you said, you have a good team. That's our channel. Excellent diagrams. Mind going over how you've been approaching your 5-year plan? Yeah, I'm not sure if you heard the sort of high level of it, but I'm not going to type this out. It basically boiled down to next couple of years, like try to grow at my job, get promoted, like kind of follow the career track. Then the next few years, it's try to grow as an engineer into whatever the next role will be. And so how I've been approaching that, the sort of get promoted track at Google, there's a very well-defined track, and they separate it into a bunch of different parts. So basically, like, do you have the right complexity of your work? Do you have the right scope? Do you have the right impact on people? Are you showing leadership? There's like a lot of properties for this, you know, and these are pretty straightforward. They're not all that crazy. So basically, what they say is of a level, let's say you were level 1, which I don't even think exists at Google, but if you were level 1, it's like, let's just say it was write hello world, and at like level 3, it's like solve ambiguous problems. So this might be concrete, but this one's a little bit harder to say, like, are they ambiguous enough? Am I solving enough of the problems? So that's kind of how I'm steering the next couple of years, is how does Google define this? And then after that, what I'm going to try to do is get to that level of sort of comfort and impact that I'm happy with, and then maybe try to shift toward the next plan. So that's kind of how I'm steering this. I'm not sure if that answers your question. Feel free to ask more. Not sure if it's good to see you stream or not. Did you get fired? No, I didn't get fired. That's why I'm only streaming on every other Saturday, because I don't have the energy to be able to stream like weeknights or something right now. I'm getting done with work and I'm generally exhausted. Like, I think it's taking a lot out of me to sort of finish the onboarding sorts of things and feel like I'm making an impact and navigate all the ambiguity I do have already. And the ambiguity isn't even necessarily technological ambiguity. Sometimes it's just like, have I done enough research before I should ask a question about this? Am I spending my time on the right problems? There's a concept at Google, at least, of putting up blinders. Imagine you go to Wikipedia and you just type cat, and okay, you're on Wikipedia now. Look at how many blue links there are. And you guys have probably done this, right? You're like, oh man, like cat registries, what's that? And you click that, and now you're on a similar looking page that's got a bunch of blue links on it. And you're like, wait a second, like ancient Egypt. And by the time you know it, you're like 6 pages away from where you started, and you're not even looking at cats anymore. You're looking at like honeybees or something. At Google, that same thing happens where learning about technology A is built on technologies B, C, and E. And you go through all of these. I skipped D. You go through all of these, and by the time you wanted to learn about technology A, you realize, yeah, you're nowhere near the beginning of it. So yeah, I need to put up blinders. I need to be careful about where I'm spending my time, and all of that is the ambiguity I'm talking about. That's leaving me kind of exhausted at the end of this. Understanding your goals will change over time. That's fine. Yeah, this is something you guys probably saw me doing my own career planning, and I said here are routes that I want. Is like route 1 would be something like get back to my own business. Route 2 would be something, I don't know, whatever I said. And route 3, I actually had said like just feel comfortable at my job. Like no shame in going a more traditional route. If that's what I'm happy with 5 years from now, I will stick with it. And I needed to explicitly say that to myself. What's the age limit if someone wants to start learning coding? I always kind of joke about this and say it's like 90 or 100 or something like that. There is no age limit when it comes to learning coding. If you are, let's define like an average starting point. I'd say probably most people are starting somewhere between like, let's say 15 to 30. Let's make it a very wide range. And let's say you're outside of that by like a standard deviation or two and you're 45. Is it too late to learn? No. No. It is not too late to learn. In fact, you probably have a lot of benefits over someone who started much younger, because you know what learning methods work for you. You know why you're doing this. You've got more confidence in things. Maybe any number of benefits can come out of this, to the point where, yeah, I don't think there's any age limit. There's no such thing. Reduce the count of anxious thoughts, like I should know this. Yeah, that's why, like I said earlier, my biggest thing is like keep the need to know in your brain. And the need to know is like algorithms for knowing. I think I brought up Memento one time. It's a movie about a guy with interrograde amnesia. And so he's got like a 15-minute rolling memory, and he's got tattoos on his skin of what that non-need to know stuff is. And what's in his brain of need to know is to look at the tattoos. This is what happens with notes. You write down this stuff because you might not remember it. So yeah, eject it from your brain. And if you end up needing it, then just have that algorithm in your brain of like, hey, I need this thing. How do I find it? Okay, I go to my notes. Okay, I can't find it there. I go research. I can't find it there. I go talk to someone. Like that algorithm is worth having in your brain. The notes themselves aren't. Not most of the time, at least. If you're working with the technology every single day, hopefully you're not looking at your notes every single day. Hopefully at some point you get more comfortable with it. Any tips for starting with cloud tools and platforms like AWS, GCP, Azure? Yeah, biggest tip is break it down. Oh man, all the platforms you mentioned are huge. AWS especially. AWS has so many three-letter acronyms for things that there's almost no way that you could learn them all in probably like 5 years, I bet. Maybe you can in 5 years. I don't know. But yeah, so break it down. So come up with a task that you want to do and maybe start small with something like just run a program on a VM in the cloud. And if you were doing this on AWS, you need to like set up a VPC. You need to look at how do I change security groups so that I've got my IP address can connect to it, or maybe other people. You need to look at like what am I using for EC2? What am I using to actually run the compute stuff? How does billing work? How does that work? There's so much that, yeah, breaking it down even to just running a program might seem a little bit difficult, but you'll find guides for it. And in finding those guides, you'll do kind of what I mentioned on Wikipedia, where you're like, what's a VPC? What's a security group? And you'll slowly get to know some of these things. Have you ever visited a psychologist? You seem so sure about yourself. I'm wondering if you learned it or you're always like that. I don't think I shared this on stream, but okay. So last year we were talking about on stream, we were talking about ego, and this was roughly around I think July or August, and I said I think my ego is a problem, and I should try to work on this. And I started going to therapy. And first of all, I think therapy is like the greatest thing in the world, and that the only reason why more people can't necessarily do it is because you have to have that goal in mind to do it yourself. It can't ever be foisted on you. I think it's like interventions, you know? If someone comes to you and says you have a problem and you don't think you have a problem, you're not going to want to work on what is a problem because you don't see it as one. So anyway, I started therapy, and my therapist, she asked me, she had my wife in for one of the sessions. She started asking her like, hey, how do you feel Adam's ego impacts you or everything? And what we found out is that it's not actually this probably. Like I have problems. I'm not saying I'm a flawless person, but it's not exactly what I thought it was. And so we started to talk about techniques for working on these things, and that's a whole other story. So have I visited a psychologist? Like, yes, basically. The me feeling sure about myself, I think this is coming from a couple of different things. One is, even if I had 1 year of experience, that still means I have 1 year of experience worth sharing. And it just means that there'd be fewer people out there who could benefit from it. But there'd still be something worth sharing. And there'd be a lot more I don't knows peppered in. And you hear me say I don't know to these answers quite a lot anyway. Someone asked about, hey, what do you think about crypto? And I'm like, just haven't dealt with it. Totally comfortable saying that. The second thing is, I think there's a certain amount of speaking authoritatively that then resonates with your audience. I have some knowledge. I think if I were to say like, well, look, I don't know for sure, you should double check this yourself and everything, I think it would be a little bit harder for people to digest that way. So yeah, it's a very interesting question. I know I touched on some kind of intensely personal things for that answer, but yeah, I think part of it comes with time, part of it's intentional, part of it is worked on mindfully. Never thought of it that way for some reason. I'll think about that. Thanks. Hang on, wait, I forgot your question already. Oh yeah. It's always kind of drilled down here. Yeah, that's good. Glad that helps. War Eagle, War Pig. Learn by doing. A lot has a free tier in the first year. It's a great way to learn. Yeah, and this is what's kind of a shame. I think they changed it a little bit, but I always hate the idea of free tier, but in parentheses like, but for a year. Like, I want something where I can be like, there's no pressure, there's no time pressure. And I think AWS has an always free tier now, question mark. I don't know. They might have though. Actually, yeah, I think they do. Have you ever managed people dealing with reviews, approving holidays, conduct issues? If so, how did you find it? That is not something I've done. but something I wanted to ask about. So on Monday, I have a meeting set up with a manager in my organization, and I just want to interview him and say, how do you like it? How's it shift from being an individual contributor? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I have like 8 questions typed out, and they're going to take way longer than the half hour we have scheduled. But I think it's interesting. I just don't know for sure if I'd like it. Yes, this is question time. And good, cool. I've answered your question before I even knew you asked it. Yeah, by the way, I'm like 14 minutes behind the chat. I should set some boundaries here. So here's what I'm gonna say. Any questions asked by, let's say 12:20, I'll answer. But then we're gonna wind down. So I'm gonna try to keep this at the top of my screen. Whoops. You know what, let's just split this into this. Read this. So any questions asked by this time, I'll answer you. Right, or 10. Wait, sorry, that's a lot of like process for that. Oh man, I'm like losing my voice, something fierce here. Okay, let me see where I am today because I've self-learned. Not got a bit of paper. Yeah, all the stuff I learned about AWS, I learned by just doing on stream. And it was very daunting. I took a bunch of notes on this stuff, of course. Everything you see in this notebook, which all this is public, if you type the notes command, you can get access to this. I don't think it's very helpful probably anymore, but this is all stuff I just learned by, yeah, doing or people helping through chat. Yeah. You worry about your expertise and scale, focus tooling may not be transferable. I think everything you do at any big company, there's going to be some amount of transferable knowledge, and that amount is probably pretty low, like 30%. So I think it's all about getting the higher level knowledge that will always transfer. Like, how do you solve a problem? This is something that transfers to every job you'll ever have. How do you organize your thoughts? How do you, this goes on forever. How do you communicate with other people? These are things that transfer to every job. Yeah, working on like scale versus working on this database versus this language, those things, yeah, you might just drop them and then never need them again. But how you learn those things, that's going to transfer. So I am trying to keep that in mind. And also, I don't have any concrete plans to switch away just yet. It's just a game of whack-a-mole, yep. I mean, it kind of is. Yeah. Yeah, damn it, I hope it helped. Part of me trying to promo, I'm taking on broader, more ambiguous projects. Do you have advice for transition from scope to broad? Do you go through a similar transition? Seeing on broader projects, I think the way I look at this is get your ambiguity level down to the same level of someone who's I'm going to say it this way so that I don't use the word level too many times. Someone who's been promoted. So I kind of mentioned this in the imposter syndrome post. You can't quantify your ambiguity, but just say you could. It was on a scale of 1 to 100. And say you feel like you're at like a 50. Well, maybe everyone who is working at that level also feels like a 50. Maybe it's a 45, maybe it's a 55, maybe someone's like crazy and has it down to a 20. But in general, if you're at the same ambiguity level, then you're just as well suited to solve this problem as almost anybody else. So this is not exactly concrete advice. I guess what I'm trying to say is that ambiguity is baked into the problem. So I think learning to gauge yourself against other people or how this problem might be solved, I think is something you gotta get comfortable with. Hey, Chili Willy, thank you. It's always strange when I get comments like that on Twitch. Can you use Bing when you're on Google's network? Probably. I never tried, I think. Actually, maybe I did try. I don't know. But here's a reason why I don't want to do that. There are a lot of things where, like, imagine if there was some, like, super secret technology, and let's just for laughs call it, like, super bots or something, you know? And so you type in, like, super bots, how to initiate mainframe or something, and you type it into the wrong search engine. I always worry, am I leaking information now to... I don't know. Hey, this is probably paranoia. I just don't see a need to use Bing while I'm at Google. But while I'm at home, I get money. So I might as well use Bing. Oh, my phone lit up. It knows I'm talking about it. Hey, Salman. And yeah, I am enjoying the job. It's going well. Lego is more age restricted than coding. Actually, yeah, doesn't Lego isn't like what 3 to 99 or something? So if you're above 99, you just can't touch a Lego block or you die. That's funny. I read the age limit question is I'm 13. I'm not 45. Yeah. Oh, did I type memento? Yeah, I meant memento. Muscle memory and not actually paying attention. Let me continue. Like I said, we are at 12:18 right now. Any questions in the next 2 minutes, feel free to ask, but then I do need to start wrapping this up. The way I look at this is I've been streaming for 3 hours and 20 minutes, and it's like that much just kind of nonstop talking and coughing and like drinking water. So I need to go get up, get some food, kind of progress the rest of my weekend. Intention was not to call you out on your ego, the other way around. I'd like to be more sure of myself. Oh, I did not take it as you were trying to call me out. I don't know if that's even a concern for you necessarily. I think your concern might be that I didn't answer your question, which is how to be more sure about yourself. I think reading that imposter syndrome post is going to be helpful because that's a lot of the same concepts of how do I know that I'm doing well compared to other people. And a lot of what I say is like, don't compare yourself to other people. So these are a lot of my thoughts on that. Yeah, actually, I think that's pretty much it. It's everything in this post is what will hopefully help you feel more confident about yourself. Yeah. Yeah, I should actually keep that in mind. And thanks, CJ. And hi. Hey, Takuda. I'm going to start working as a junior backend dev in a month, and if they don't find a senior dev by that time, I'm going to start alone on the project. Be the first dev. There are senior devs on other teams that'll help with production and staging in Source, but I'll be alone. Any tips? This is actually pretty tough because honestly, even if they find a senior developer by that time, they'd be starting just like you would be starting. But there's one benefit, I think, which is that they might know a little bit more about how to find the answers than you would, and so you could probably try to get some help that way. But like I say, since they're going to be new too, it's almost as though you're starting without that person. So biggest tip for this is involve those other senior devs, Serenos, senior devs, and make sure they're comfortable with that. So out of any of them, find some who can help you with the generic stuff. So I had kind of a little bit of a wake-up call at Google this last week, but for the positive. The wake-up call was someone had said to me, like, hey, I actually think you're onboarding really well. I wouldn't be surprised if you're taking on much more responsibility in the next few months. And that was very heartwarming. And what it made me realize is, like, and maybe I'm not that far off, but then also what he offered, he said, look, the job is basically like two parts. There's the Google specific stuff, which of course you don't know, you just joined. And then there's the software engineering stuff, which you've been doing for a while. Any of the Google specific stuff, he said, feel free to just ask me about. Like, we know that, we've got that down, we can help you, we can fill in that information. So you're gonna have the same thing. And this is true of any company. You're gonna have the company specific stuff and you're gonna have everything else, which is what I mean in this case is the software engineering focused tasks. This you should ask about 100%. This stuff you should be growing and everything, but since you're a junior dev, you should also kind of be asking about, but a little bit less so maybe than the company specific stuff. We have a star macro now? No, it's just Windows key period. And then you can just type star and then I just duplicated it a bunch of times. It's just the emoji picker. What did I miss? Okay, recently straight up asked the people who hired me what their expectations they have for me, and it's really giving you a line to work from. Nice, yeah. Are you doing the development for your work? Is that what's shifting toward programming now? What tools am I using for notes? What VS extension? The VS extension is called To Do Plus. I think I have a command for that. I'm not sure if that actually works because I haven't scrolled down in chat yet. But yeah, it's called To Do Plus. And it's this that you see. I'm not sure if this is what you were talking about though. If you're talking about just this is just me typing out stars and stuff. So this is just Visual Studio Code with no extensions really. And then this is OneNote. And those notes are available when you type the notes command. Yeah. Yeah. That's how I see it at least. This is just my own kind of personal take on this. How often did you go back to and review basic or advanced math topics when you needed them in software? Pretty rarely. And the only time I think I've ever needed any of the kind of math for this, there are only two cases I can think of. Probability, which is kind of rare to work with, but every once in a while you'll want to do some kind of like trend analysis sort of thing, and then you need to think like, well, how do I even use these statistics? So I guess probability and statistics I should look at it too. And then the second one is any sort of like linear algebra or trigonometry or I don't know what else to say for this, like 3D math. It's kind of non-committal, but that's all for game stuff. And that's it. Those are the times I've had to do this the majority of the time. There are very rare instances where I'm trying to do something with like a UI and you have to do some, I don't know, actually this isn't even worth listing out. Yeah, it's pretty much those. So not very frequently. Usually you can find frameworks that'll do that stuff for you. By the way, we are at the point where I'm not going to accept any new questions, so I will answer all the old ones up until like 12:20, and then I should probably start wrapping up a little bit. But I am curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Did you like the stream? Are any people returning from the last one and still found value from this one? I'd love to read about that. How do I know if I was compromised? Because I guess they were able to enter remote code execution. How, if you were compromised, I don't know if you can know that unless Discord made that information public. I think if you're in the EU, I think they have to make it public to you at some point within a reasonable amount of time. And if you're not, then I don't think there are any obligations. So regardless, what's good to do is change your password, change everything else, like do a virus scan sort of thing. Yeah. I'll take care, Quinn. Yeah, you might not have gotten to hear my responses 7 minutes ago. Not talking about personal feeling of ambiguity. It's that I'm leading projects that are ambiguous and how to achieve their goals, commanding the resources in there. Yeah. And that's the ambiguity I was talking about as well. I guess what I'm getting at is like your goal. Oh, I see what you're saying. Is because I had mentioned that thing about level of ambiguity in your own head. Yeah, I see it as that same way. I guess let me make sure I've got the context of your last message here too. Advice on the transition from scope to broad. Yeah, I guess my advice is going to be more along the lines of like what you do is not going to be so much development work. You might think it'll be a lot of design, planning, and maybe prototyping level work. And that shift is something you've got to internalize so that you realize like, wait, if I'm not coding, that doesn't mean I'm not on track. The question's cut off in a minute. Get it in now. Oh, I think I missed Iron Spark's question. Transitioning role from just developer to also. Oh yeah, sorry. This is leading a team of devs. How to not mess up. I think EJ can probably answer this sort of thing. I think so. I've read about management anti-patterns. I don't know if these are like public, but some of them are. Don't try to be your direct report's friend. You're not. If you're their friend, great. But that's not something you like strive for. That's not a goal of doing the job. I think these are goals though of when you're an individual contributor. You're trying to be like friends with the other teammates. Like that's pretty natural. You get along, but you're going to be in a position of authority at that point, and there are different expectations. There are lots of other anti-patterns and of course patterns that you could follow, but that I can't necessarily share because I'm not a manager and haven't had to memorize them or anything. But I think when you're going from, if these devs were your peers, I think that's even harder sometimes because some people don't accept the shift in authority. But I think in general, it's like be open to feedback. I think you should always be open to feedback, but especially if you're new to a role. And yeah, ask people how they're doing, ask what their pain points are, how you can help alleviate them. Unfortunately, I don't have a ton of information to share there. And thank you, Defining Goal, for pointing that out. Cybersecurity and software dev can be combined. I'm into both. I don't know what path to choose. Oh yeah, for sure they can be combined. The way I see cybersecurity is that it's very closely related to software dev. Although you could ignore the software dev part and just use tools, but you could look at it as either protecting, so like defense, and you could think of it as any sort of security libraries, code audits, etc. And you could look at it as like attacking or penetration testing. And then actually it's pretty similar, except for then you're kind of poking holes in other people's software, which typically involves writing software yourself. So I don't think you necessarily have to choose between the two paths. So if you felt like you had to, I would say pick software dev and steer toward the cybersecurity industry, as opposed to picking cybersecurity and then steering towards software dev. It'd probably work too. I can't speak too much into that. Oh, nice, Trey. Yeah. I'll be doing the same thing in 2 weeks. So if you guys want to make it to that, right now it is 12:30 for me. So that's just whatever 3.5 hours ago was. That's when the stream will start in 2 weeks. I see. Been looking the whole time. Definitely dug this. Nice, Steve. Nice. Thanks for spending the time to answer questions. Wish you never get many viewers so we can get our questions answered. Yeah, I'm not really trying to grow the stream now. I don't even know how many viewers there are. 210. Okay. Yeah, I think the last stream averaged about 200. I think that's good. That way there's a stream of questions, and that way people can help each other, potentially. I'll try to look at these notes that I took off screen and just kind of figure out what I can do for the next one, maybe. I might not make any changes, and it might just be because I want to focus on some other things in the meantime. Because I do feel like this is hitting the goals that I wanted to hit. So if I can improve it, great. If not, still good. Oh, nice. All right. Yeah. We should have one focused theme, so each day of mentorship can be unique. I'm not sure if that'll be necessary yet, but I will copy this down and give that a thought, hopefully. I'm just a pleb with mod. I won't do a straw poll this time around. I will actually, by the way, I will link to Discord, and if Ramey's online, we're gonna go host Ramey. I just want to get to the bottom of chat though. I think we're like 1 minute away from that. Okay. Hey, Voice of Grog. All right. Yeah, so thank you very much, everybody, for joining in. Let me go see if Ramey is online. We can host him. I think he's doing Legends of Zelda stuff. Yes, he is. He's got one viewer. I'm only laughing because I pictured that he took the stream offline and then he's like, we gotta be back. Gotta get it as viewers. Okay, cool. Yeah, the raid's kicked off. So like I said, feel free to join Discord. And Ramey's been a mod on this channel forever. Unfortunately, you guys can't use my emotes, but if you could, I'd say spam a cactus. I guess you just spam the cactus emoji. So yeah. Anyway, take care. Hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. See ya.